This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, on your radio and online.
So wherever you are, you can take us with you at your top stories this morning.
The Ukraine's foreign minister has warned that no sanctions will be enough until Russia leaves Ukraine after President Putin sent tanks into the eastern part of the country. The UK, the US, Canada and Australia have all announced new sanctions.
And we'll find out what the economic fallout of the crisis in Ukraine means for you at home when you're already facing the cost of living squeeze.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson will face the Commons later today at PMQs, where the Ukraine crisis and the end of coronavirus restrictions are sure to dominate the debate.
Also coming up, the Queen cancels virtual engagements due to continued mild coronavirus symptoms, but is expected to still have her regular call with the Prime Minister later today. Plus, we'll have all the latest royal news for you this hour.
Well, of course, you can join in any of our discussions today. We'd love to hear from you. GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews.
So our top story this morning, the UK, the US, the European Union, Canada and Australia, among others, have announced new sanctions against Russia after it sent tanks into the eastern regions of Ukraine.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has the very latest for you this morning.
Heading for the border of eastern Ukraine, Russian tanks and other military vehicles in a move that Western leaders have long warned of. Moscow says this operation is not an invasion, but a stabilization mission aimed at protecting the Russian-backed separatists in the regions around the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk. Western condemnation has now been followed by a package of sanctions, and a move by Germany to suspend operations to bring Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline into service. In Brussels, NATO's Secretary-General said it wasn't too late for Moscow to pull back from the brink.
I welcome the economic sanctions announced today by many NATO allies. and the decision by the German government that it cannot certify the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We urge Russia in the strongest possible terms to choose the path of diplomacy.
In the Ukrainian army trenches overlooking this disputed territory, the situation is extremely tense, with claims rebel groups have stepped up their shelling to instigate a response.
The enemy has been using its heavy weaponry against us. They are always ready to provoke us, blame us for their actions, so that we answer by shooting at them.
In recent days, several Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. This funeral in Kiev for an intelligence officer who died in shelling at the border over the weekend. In Donetsk, scenes of celebration here in this rebel-held city. There is widespread support for the prospect of Russian troops on these streets, but there are also some who are uneasy.
It is such a bleak environment at the moment. I don't know how good the decision is and if it will lead to peace. Now everyone is very worried. Everyone is being taken away from their fathers, brothers, husbands. In fact, everyone is very scared.
It is very important for all of us that peace will finally come to Donetsk and to Luhansk. We just want peace and calm. For us, it is very important. We want to live as one big family together with Russia.
With the Russian parliament having formally ratified Vladimir Putin's request to use troops in eastern Ukraine, the scene is now set for what the West believes is an inevitable incursion into Ukrainian territory. How far these troops advance is the big unknown. Mark White, GB News.
Well, let's hear now from Professor Emeritus of International Politics Studies at the University of Birmingham, Scott Lucas. A very good morning to you, Professor. Look, lots of questions about whether or not these sanctions are actually enough to change the course of events from Putin's perspective. What do you think?
Well, it's important to note that these sanctions are just the first stage, the first escalation. That's true of the U.S. sanctions, which are primarily against the Russian proxies inside Ukraine. It's true of the UK sanctions, which so far are only on 5 banks and 3 individuals closely connected to President Putin. And it's true of the EU sanctions that cover 27 individuals and entities. And why is this the first stage? Because Russia hasn't yet moved its military into eastern Ukraine to prop up its proxies in the so-called republics. If Russia does so, you give yourself space then to come out with the harder sanctions, the more sweeping sanctions. And trust me, those have been prepared to the point of cutting Russia off from the international economic system.
I mean, when we were talking yesterday to our former ambassador to Moscow, and he was saying, look, at the end of the day, Putin doesn't care about sanctions, he cares about security.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, I don't agree. What he cares about is his ego and making Ukraine part of greater Russia. Now, he will pretend that that is his security. I do think that he will continue unless you draw a line against him. But you are drawing a series of lines. In other words, you still want to give him space to back away at this moment and not send those troops across the border, not bomb Kiev and other cities. The most significant sanction yesterday, by the way, is Germany's announcement that it will now suspend indefinitely Nord Stream 2, because that gas pipeline would be worth billions of dollars a year to Russia and Vladimir Putin. That's now off the table unless Putin steps back.
Although, of course, Russia has the threat to return that Nord Stream 1, they can just up the price of gas, which they're already threatening to do. And, of course, that supplies over half of the gas that Germany uses, for example. So, you know, this is very difficult times for all Western allies to impose these sanctions because, of course, it has a cost for us as well.
Again, there are 2 really key points around this. The first is this has been anticipated by European countries, including Germany, by the U.S. and by others. And so there have been alternative supplies of gas, including from the U.S., that have been moved towards Europe for weeks. Now, those may not be enough to cover all of the demand that we normally have, so there may be an increase in prices. compounded, of course, by our situation here in the UK with the lifting of the cap. But the second key point is we're coming out of winter in a few weeks. And so in a few weeks, demand will drop. We won't need as much gas. And so Russia's leverage will drop if we get into the spring, and they still haven't stepped back.
What are we to make of the troop build-up? And certainly we've heard from the United States saying they're going to deploy more to the region. Is that going to be anything that worries President Putin, considering how much he's got on the border at the moment?
It won't specifically worry Putin over Ukraine because those troops are not going into Ukraine. To do so would risk a direct confrontation with Moscow. But they are going into NATO members, for example, the Baltic states, for example, Poland, because Putin has been trying to undermine those areas as well in recent months, trying to stir up crises. So it's both a reassurance and an actual sign that NATO is very much here and is not backing away. I think Putin's big worry long-term in Ukraine will be insurgency. I think it will be Ukrainians themselves that resist a Russian occupation. And there, I would watch, even if we don't see it, for U.S. and European covert operations to provide some type of support for the insurgents.
Just finally, do you think this summit between President Putin and President Biden will go ahead? I mean, we've heard, haven't we, in the last 24 hours, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, cancelling his face-to-face with his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, which lots of people have welcomed. But we've seen, you know, it's a difficult balance because you either, you know, you're trying to broker peace, you're trying to get the diplomatic route, but you're also being seen to pander to somebody who's being very undiplomatic. What's the right approach to this, do you think?
There will be no more one-on-one meetings with Putin or with his senior officials. Just before Putin recognized these Russian proxy groups in this staged announcement, Russia said there will be no Biden-Putin phone call, no virtual summit. So the fact is that the diplomacy here moves away from people going to see Putin in Moscow to other forums. For example, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The door's open. If Russia wants to talk about a strategic framework for Europe, they can now go to the OSCE. They can now come back to NATO, which does have a NATO-Russian Council, and they can talk sensibly about European security and back away from the invasion.
OK, look, it's really good to get your perspective today. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. That's Professor Scott Lucas, a Professor of American Studies at the University of Birmingham. Well, Boris Johnson is set to face PMQs today, where presumably Russia will, well, no doubt be top of the agenda.
Let's talk to our political reporter this morning, Bill Bowkett. Thank you for joining us nice and early this morning. Look, there has been widespread criticism, not just from across the political divide, but from some of Boris Johnson's own party, and not necessarily, you know, underknown people like Jeremy Hunt, Ian Duncan Smith, saying that these sanctions don't go far enough. Do you think that he'll come under fire in PMQs today?
I think that's certainly the case. I think the potential conflict in Ukraine and the UK's response is likely to feature as one of the key issues, although I do question whether they might pull back from it slightly, given the fact that I think Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, want to seen almost united in the front in the face of Russian aggression. But yes, certainly, I think questions will be asked of the Prime Minister of his response. Of course, yesterday we saw that the Prime Minister introduced sanctions for 5 big banks, one of them being a Prometska Bank, which is actually the bank tied to the Russian military because they have several dozen lucrative defense contracts done through their accounts, and then also the 3 oligarchs as well. So there was questions as to whether more should be the case. I think you saw yesterday Layla Moran of the Liberal Democrats using parliamentary privilege to call out more than 30 oligarchs and whether they should be banned from the UK, and also questions as to the Prime Minister's claim that sanctions have been put on Roman Abramovich, the Chelsea Football Club owner, which had to be brought to a point of order from Chris Bryant, the chair of the Standards Committee. So certainly there's lots of sticking points on the issue of Ukraine today at PMQs.
Maybe a lot of people at home who say, well, look, why aren't they focusing more? Why isn't top of their agenda this whole cost of living crisis?
No, definitely. I think possible questions on the cost of living and inflation. definitely is going to be coming up. If it's not from Sir Keir Starmer, it certainly will be from Labour MPs and some Tories as well. So you've seen today that government interest payments, hitting a record high of 6 billion, and you're still seeing that inflation is continuing to rise, despite the economic forecast that the Bank of England predicted, at the end of last year, forecasting for 2022. I think Boris Johnson will have his, often typical response where he will talk about growth, employment, and the fact that wages are up, and actually overall interest payments are actually very, very low. And there's new reports from the Institute for Fiscal Studies that would back up that. But obviously, the big elephant in the room, and it continues to be a hemorrhage on the Conservative Party, is this planned rise in national insurance contributions, which the Tories aren't going to be able to escape from, especially in the light of the cost of living crisis and also the situation in Ukraine, which could increase gas prices further.
And look, Bill, given the situation in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis that you're outlining there, lots of people will be very frustrated to learn that Partygate will come up in PMQs again today. The Times has it back on their front page, and this is after it's emerged that Prime Minister Johnson will be the first ever Prime Minister to be questioned under caution, and this is after he's completed his questionnaire for the Met Police.
Yeah, Partygate's not going away. It's been pretty delightful, actually, for number 10, the fact that Ukraine and the cost of living crisis have been dominating the agenda, putting Partygate almost to one side. But it's now going to be coming back into foyer because, as you say, Boris Johnson, first Prime Minister, be questioned under caution by the police, this leaked copy of the Scotland Yard questionnaire. I think also the level of probing is the historic first. I think if you can remember, Tony Blair once said that he'd resign in such an event during the Cash for Honour scandal back in the early to mid 2000s. So Boris Johnson is going to continue to deny that he attended those 6 alleged events. He's going to go down the continued whip line about how he have to wait until the criminal investigation by the Metropolitan Police is concluded, and that he doesn't want to comment further because he doesn't want to impede on the wider process. But it's going to be in the agenda because the investigation will have to conclude at some point, and ultimately it could result in Boris Johnson receiving a fixed term penalty, and it could potentially decide his premiership.
OK, Bill Bowkett, a political reporter from Reaction, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Let's take you through the other headlines today. The Foreign Secretary says nothing is off the table to stop President Putin's incursion into Ukraine. In the Times, Liz Truss says the next package of sanctions has been discussed at a call with G7 allies. It says the White House says a proposed summit between President Biden and President Putin will no longer go ahead.
And we'll be hearing from the Foreign Secretary a little bit later on in the programme. There's still no sign of normal weather just yet, as the UK is bracing for more strong winds and heavy snow amid flooding warnings. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for wind across North East England, Cumbria and North Yorkshire. A second warning for wind and snow has now been issued for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland from later today.
Almost half of young people say the pandemic has left them feeling burnt out and experiencing feelings of self-loathing. Prince's Trust surveyed 16 to 25-year-olds, discovering what they call an alarming downward spiral of anxiety, stress and lack of confidence for the future.
A think tank is warning that a retirement guidance gap risks causing real financial harm and needs to be overhauled. The Social Market Foundation says more than 2/3 of 50 to 64-year-olds do not know how much they'll need for their retirement, and they need better financial guidance.
Around 1 million operations a year are cancelled or delayed because of a shortage of 1,400 anaesthetists. The Royal College of Anaesthetists says that could rise to 8 million operations by 2040, with the staff shortfall set to reach 11,000 if action is not taken.
Hearing aids could help to reduce a person's risk of mental decline by as much as 53%. Researchers from Ulster and Oxford universities found that better access to quality hearing healthcare could help mitigate a dementia epidemic.
More than 8 in 10 Scots are worried about the soaring cost of energy on household budgets. A YouGov poll shows consumers in Scotland are concerned about the huge rise in prices set for April.
And a new task force has been set up to explore disparities in maternity care. It will examine the reasons why women and their babies from ethnic minority communities and those from poorer neighbourhoods have worse outcomes.
Now, we are hitting that point in the pandemic where a lot of people, not everyone though, a lot of people are starting to head back to the office for the first time in quite a long time, actually. And so that brings up a few tensions as well.
Yeah, it reminds people about all the niggles. I mean, we never really, well, you did work from home for a bit, but I've carried on all the way through. So I've never really stopped having the niggles. But some people have forgotten how annoying colleagues can be. And apparently, a lot of the papers are writing about it this morning, aren't they? But there's a few absolute pressure points. What are they?
Yes, well, interestingly, though, a lot of them are about toilets. There we go. Loud talking, coughing without covering, ill colleagues. I mean, what can you do?
What can you do?
What can you do? Slow computers. Now that drives me
Yeah.
mad.
Do you know what I struggle with is temperature wars. Everywhere I've worked, it's always been too cold, and the girls, generally, the ladies, always tend to find it cooler than the gents. So there's always a row over whether it's, you know, too hot or too cold.
Depends of the age of the lady you're working with.
I'm always cold.
I've been in some studios where, unless it's about -3, they're not happy. IT issues, well, that goes with the computers really. Smelly toilets, dishes in the communal sink, not washing hands after going to the toilet, filthy toilets, and computers crashing. So there is a theme there, toilets and computers.
Let us know what your niggles are, your back-to-work niggles, and we'll read out some of those as well a little bit later on in the programme.
Yeah, GBViews at gbnews.uk. And I wonder if anyone like me has a niggle of sitting here while someone has about 18 cans of hairspray sprayed upon them, and you
It's
just
rock
get
solid.
it. You get it in the
I
face.
know, sorry.
Here.
No, to be fair, that was our lovely makeup artist who just, luckily your glasses act as a bit of a defender, but you just got a waft, didn't you?
But you like a lot of hairspray.
I do, otherwise it doesn't do
When she was
anything.
getting done this, and she had it sprayed about 18 times in makeup. And
No,
then
it wasn't
come
all,
in
do you know
here,
what?
and
This
it
is when he
wasn't
doesn't
strong
know.
enough.
It wasn't all hairspray, some of it was texturiser.
It was what?
One can was texturiser for volume, and the other one's to hold it in place. Yeah.
Texturiser?
The ladies will know.
I've never heard of texturiser.
Well, you don't have to worry about these things. You're lucky. So what are your niggles? Let us know. Get in touch. And don't forget, you can tweet as well at GBNews. Yeah, hard to breathe.
Anyway, stay with us this morning. Coming up, we're going to find out what the crisis in Ukraine could mean for you at home. First, so here's the weather.
Good morning. The winds will again be picking up today and potentially causing some problems. We have more Met Office warnings in place. Wet weather for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mostly dry day for England and Wales. Now, this time yesterday we had a weather front slipping south, and we've got almost a repeat performance today. But this one's really introducing some much colder air, and behind this cold front, we're going to see things turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Initially, though, that'll just be a band of rain with some hill snow mixed in. The wind's picking up. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place through today across southeast Scotland and northeast England, with those gusts likely to reach 40, 50 or 60 miles an hour. After recent storms, that could cause some issues. Quite a wet day then for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland. For England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers, but generally it's dry and still pretty mild here, 10, 11 degrees Celsius. But the colder air is pushing in behind this rain band, and we have a Met Office warning in place for the combination of snow and wind across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The snow showers really getting going overnight. We could easily see covering several centimetres, even at low levels, and quite a bit more than that over the hills. It'll be rain that pushes south across England and Wales, but the showers following on across northern England, likely to have a wintry mix in here too. And the warning is still in place for much of Thursday as the winds start to whip up once more, blowing the snow around. So a combination of snow and wind blizzards makes for some pretty grim travelling conditions during tomorrow across western Scotland, even central and eastern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it'll start wet across the southeast. It then turns brighter with sunny spells, just a sprinkling of showers, snow on the hills across northern England for sure. But it will be blustery once more, and that's going to make it feel cold through tomorrow. Temperatures only 6 or 7 for many of us. Add on that wind, it will feel much colder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, 6:24. Oh, sorry, darling. 6:24. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel. There's one question on everyone's minds this morning.
Why have we switched chairs?
Yeah.
Good question. I don't like it on this side.
No, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
It's like driving a hire car. You're all like discombobulated.
It was a suggestion because obviously their names appear, Stephen and Isabel.
Yeah.
Like
so it sort of works
so
along the strap.
So,
there you go.
There you go. So it works.
Now you know who we are.
Just in case you were a bit confused.
Let us know. Do you like it this way round or the way it was before?
I might switch back when it's San on Friday. Switch back. We'll see.
We'll see. We're trying it out. Look, we're talking about Russia this morning, and of course, the really important question, I suppose, in all this crisis, is what the impact could be on us here at home. Big impacts, of course, on gas supplies to Europe, but will that be affecting us?
Let's talk to business and finance commentator Michael Wilson. Morning to you, Michael. Look, I mean, when it comes to sanctions, there is implications for the UK that need to be considered. How could it affect us?
I think that generally speaking, the cost of living will go up because although we don't import a huge amount of gas directly from Russia, it adds to the price of the wholesale energy markets, any kind of sanctions, any kind of strangulation on that. And you're quite right to observe Europe in all this. And what we're seeing this morning is that Germany has held back on the final approval for the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which, again, doesn't affect us directly, affects more of Europe. This is the one from Russia into Europe. They're holding back on that. Now, again, you can look at these kind of things and you think, well, how long is that going to last? Well, how long will how long will it be before Europe starts to scream for more energy and so on? So basically speaking, I think it's just going to add to pressures generally. Don't forget also, as far as the UK is concerned, I think the cost of living crisis is the most important thing that the country's been facing for many, many years. And we're going to see tax increases in April. We're seeing more people maybe going back to work, maybe not going back to work. We don't really know what the shape of the economy is going to be. And perhaps also, just as important, is we don't know how many interest rate rises, which are inevitable, in my view, are going to happen before the end of this year, and we're only sort of, just about coming into March. So yes, I think generally speaking, what we're seeing happening a long way off is going to have a direct effect on the cost of living here.
And look, we've often talked about it in our segments before, Michael, how, we talk about the markets, and a lot of people think it's some abstract thing that only affects people, living and working and breathing in the stock exchange. But actually, that's people's pensions. It's tied up in all sorts of other wealth and assets. How are the markets responding then to the gas prices and the news of the sanctions?
That's such an interesting question. Let me just extrapolate slightly on that. So what's happening at the moment, and certainly overnight as far as Asia is concerned, I think you'll see this spreading through, is whilst there's lots of volatility on the markets, because a lot of these people have never had to deal with something as serious as this. I mean, this is the absolute bottom line. The fact of the matter is that these so-called sanctions are seen as powder puff sanctions, particularly the ones that the UK has placed upon Russia. And so the markets will today, I think, we're going to see a lot of volatility, and there'll be a lot of different views when we find out what's really happening on that border, because we still don't know what the true picture is. But the markets are saying, well, yeah, OK, so you've got sanctions on 3 Russians, so what? You know, that's what they're thinking. So they think this is what I think you would term like an incremental progress as far as sanctions are concerned. And so far, and you were talking about Boris Johnson facing parliamentary questions today, and many people will be saying these do not go far enough. Even the Green Party, not known, as I can say, for its top of the class arithmetical performance in the past, is actually looking at what's going on and saying this isn't enough. So the sanctions, whilst they send out quite severe signals to Russia, I think will have very little effect right now.
Michael, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Well, do stay with us. Coming up, we'll be looking through the papers this morning with Oscar Reddrop and Kate Hardcastle. We'll see you in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.31, good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel live across the UK on your TV and on your radio.
And we should say overseas as well. People tuning in from all over the place, not just the UK,
the world,
thanks to internet. Look, let's take a look now at your Wednesday morning newspaper front pages and start, shall we, with the Daily Mail, reporting that the US President Biden has commented that the world is on the brink of war as Russia has prepared for a full-scale assault on Ukraine.
The Guardian says Putin has said Russia will support the territorial claims of its proxy states in Donetsk and Luhansk.
In the Times, Britain and its Western allies have hit Russia with a new wave of sanctions following Russia's recognition of separatist regions in Ukraine. It also has an op-ed from the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, who will be appearing on our programme a little bit later this morning.
Let's have a look at The Independent, which says the Prime Minister has been urged to strengthen tepid Russian sanctions as they're likely to have little impact.
Here's the Express. It's reporting on the calls for the government to punish Putin harder now.
Following up on that, the Mirror says MPs and activists have called for a clampdown on London being used to launder Russian money.
The Metro says we'll grab him by the rubles and leave the Russian Federation a pariah state.
Let's talk through those in a bit more detail now. And joining us this morning, our retail expert, Kate Hardcastle, and public affairs consultant, Oscar Redrop. Good to see you both this morning. Oscar, let's start with the Mail, should we? And the comments from President Biden.
Well, I think Biden initially was quite... there was a bit of toing and froing. He was quite slow out the blocks. I think in the last week or so, particularly in the last 48 hours, his position and his kind of statesman-like approach to this has got far firmer and far better, and, you know, long may that continue. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating looking through the front pages today, even just the pictures. You know, these are serious, serious headlines and front pages for very serious times. You know, I think it's just over 100 years, almost to the day, that the First World War, and we are seeing tanks on European soil roll through the mud and prepare for war. As I said, I think we talked about this when I was on last week. You know, initially, and it was perhaps a slight. I think there was naivety out there in terms of Putin at the moment. The belief that, you know, it was a bit posturing, that he's a man who believes that you can win a war through kind of deferred threat. I never bought into that. I think we are seeing someone. It's interesting when you actually study the translation of, you know, the way he's talking at the moment. It's actually relatively unhinged, and that is a really dangerous proposition for European nations.
And Kate, do you think that's a fair assertion then, that this is, you know, perhaps we've been naive about President Putin, or do you think there is a reality that we have to hurt ourselves in order to stop him? You know, British businesses are going to suffer if, for example, at some stage we ban British exports or British tech to Russia.
Well, just starting, a lot of questions there, Isabel, but at the front, even a few weeks ago, I was hearing people, even on this show, talking about Putin being some sort of James Bond villain. I really feel there's been too much comedic kind of rhetoric about Putin. This is a very serious issue. This has been a serious issue in the Ukraine for many years, and this is people's lives and livelihoods. And I feel I've always felt that really not to be the tone of voice, the mood music we should be hearing. This is significant not just for business, and obviously if it's significant for business, there is a knock-on effect for us as consumers too. But globally, where are we? Why in times 80 years on from World War II should we even be in this situation? So for me, I feel generally that the commentary, the discussion hasn't been with the severity and clarity that it should have been.
Well, and with that in mind, I mean, The Independent says the Prime Minister's been urged to strengthen what they're calling tepid sanctions. Well, as we're saying that is going to bite on us at a time of the cost of living crisis and people already struggling.
So we've just seen headlines about heating or eating. That's a very real situation. We have more people in the UK going to food banks than ever before. That's not the same amount of people visiting more often. That's people who are visiting, who have mortgages, who have two incomes and still can't make ends meet. We know this has an immediate impact in terms of fuel and fuel costs. So absolutely, there is an impact on the home front. But, you know, we've got also The Independent talking about, has Boris made enough of a statement of these sanctions? Do you remember the promise he made? He made the promise that he would come down with steel force on Putin if he even took one foot in these borders. And now we've perhaps got some suggestion that something might be done a little bit more than this if we hear more today.
I totally understand that concern. The one thing I'd push back on is that you have to leave yourself with room to go. You have to, you know, there has to be like a ratcheting process here. You have to, as tempting as it is, to just put all your chips in the middle of the table and go, here we are, Putin, what are you going to do? But actually, ultimately, you have to, even at this 11th hour, even with the tanks rolling through, you have to create a bit of space and you have to create a bit of room
that
Putin can come back.
But Boris perhaps shouldn't have come out with such a bold claim and then look like he's eased off on that. In all negotiations, you have to look like you're going to follow through, and that's absolutely significant. And if you look at what Germany's done, that is such an impactful move with not only the home front, but actually what's going to happen in Moscow too.
It was interesting, the word tepid, I think it was being used by Bill Browder yesterday, of course, the former Russian financier and now internationally acclaimed humanitarian who's worked a lot on Russian corruption. And he said of the 5 banks that the UK is sanctioning, he hadn't even heard of 4 of them, and one of them was already under US sanctions. So there is widespread expert criticism that, OK, fair enough, keep something in your back pocket for the next round. But was this perhaps just, optics at this stage that Putin doesn't really care about?
Well, I know for a fact that absolutely that increased sanctions are absolutely being discussed at present. I have to say, the one thing I would urge the government, and I would urge Boris, and I do actually totally agree with you on this, that it hasn't quite been enough at this stage, is, often we have been quite, inward-looking, and we debate, what it means to be British, what makes Great Britain great, and actually it is answering the call. It is absolutely, in the face of what we're seeing in Russia, standing up for democracy. And I would only hope that in the coming days and weeks, Britain does stand up and be counted on this.
Well, in the midst of all of this, Oscar, as reported in The Times, we've still got the situation with Partygate going on, and the PM likely to be the first Prime Minister in history to be questioned under caution.
Yeah, I mean, when you spell it out like that, it's obviously a very, very surreal set of circumstances. I know for a fact that MPs... Boris has had a very interesting road to freedom, and there was if we go back a few weeks, there were moments where it looked like it was kind of all over for him. And I did say at that time, I was like, that isn't quite the case, actually. There is a route through this for Boris. Ultimately, this questionnaire, the report, and what comes back from the Met is one of the final hurdles in that road to safety for him. And MPs are absolutely reserving their judgment to see what happens there. I know for a fact there are a couple of ministers that have come out and said if he is given a fixed penalty notice, that they will that they see no future for the PM whatsoever. I imagine he would have sat down with a lawyer. I believe it's at his own expense, and would have absolutely kind of carefully gone through this.
But he has, in that questionnaire, admitted to attending 6 of those events that are under investigation, and that is through the lawyered response that he has submitted to the Met. I just wonder, Kate, what's your take on this? I mean, Tony Blair has famously said that if he had been questioned under caution, it would have been a resigning matter. He, of course, was questioned only as a witness during the Cash for Honours investigation by the police at the time. And, of course, that's only, it has to be Boris Johnson who would decide to stand down all those 54 letters being submitted that would mean the end of his premiership.
I just feel at a time where we need leadership, we need to rebuild the economy, we need strong president, it's very difficult to be dealing still with this, and particularly on the world front as well.
Interesting. And it's interesting, you say it might well get those 54 letters in. That doesn't mean, of course...
He won't survive it.
He could well survive it.
Yeah.
He could well fight it and could survive it, I mean, that's the way forward. Kate... to the Mail and public finances and Britain bouncing back, so it would seem.
Sounds very optimistic, doesn't it? What it means, basically, is that we spent less for the first month since COVID hit than... we took more in taxes than we spent less. That's basically the state of affairs, because I think most people listening at home are not going to feel like our public finances are in a good shape. We obviously need our economy to be strong and healthy and buoyant. I think absolutely we need to make sure that we are fit to go on the world economy, on those sustainability plans that were just made in October and seem like a lifetime ago. And we know that the Chancellor Rishi Sunak needs to make sure that he has got almost things back in some type of order. So on that front, absolutely, there is positive news. But we can quite understand while there is then question again about the national insurance hike, because the first thing you're going to think is, well, if you've taken in the taxes, you're not spending as much, why am I going to be impacted again in terms of my finances?
But he was talking in the papers the other day about increased public spending, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Well, how else are you going to get out of the situation? We're going to have to see some buoyancy.
Do you think we need to spend our way out of this?
I think that's the absolute way that we're going to see change, absolutely. We can't...
the exact opposite of what we saw in 2010.
Well, for sure. But we've got to see investment. Where else do we go?
Oscar, let's turn to The Times again. This is about self-censoring lecturers. There's always lots of focus on this issue, and, universities have kind of become a hotbed for what some would call sort of cancel culture. What's their take on it?
Well, I, as someone who's not long out of university, although that does...
Show off.
No, I'm not trying to gloat, although that feels like a million years ago. I found this... quite, I don't want to overdo it, but quite scary, actually. Education absolutely is, for me anyway, is an absolute, should be the absolute kind of symbol and epitome of kind of free thinking. And the fact that, university lectures, I think it was like over, 15% of university lectures feel like they have to monitor both the modules and actually how they just go about talking to students in general, particularly in subjects like politics and the humanities. I think it's hugely, hugely, hugely troubling.
Yeah, interesting that it's not necessarily because they're worried about causing offence to what a lot of people would call so-called snowflakes, but perhaps students from overseas like China, who you wouldn't necessarily think would take offence at sort of political rhetoric, given, what goes on in...
I think it is oversensitive. I mean, I would confess. I remember I was relatively lazy as a university student. I must confess. I used to say to myself, I'd have some politics essay, and I go, look, if I write something vaguely left wing, I'll probably do all right.
Ooh.
Really?
Where were you at university?
Genuinely. I'm not going to. I don't want to give up the game too much. But
and did that work for you?
It did, and it shouldn't.
Because you basically felt you were pandering to the political persuasions of the university. Yeah, and look at you now, a right-wing thinker.
So disappointed, absolutely.
So disappointed in you. Kate, in The Guardian, looking at empty flights, ghost flights, as they call them, which I know is a serious concern. However, as a passenger, you can't help but think, oh, how lovely if I've got a plane to myself.
You'd have been able to spread out, wouldn't you,
Oh,
Stephen?
yeah.
Imagine all the seats you could have had.
Oh, it'd be lovely.
Yeah, nice. Well, we know that there are slot rules, and what that basically means is that those airlines have to operate to land in certain slots to keep them. Now, I know if Simon Calder was probably here, I think he's sunning himself in Australia, actually, lucky so-and-so, but I know he would explain the importance of timetables for these airlines. They are make or break. They really do make the difference. So from a business perspective, you can understand why Virgin is saying, look, they weren't empty, they weren't ghost flights. Yes, there were less passengers, we understand that, but we had to operate, we had to move within the rules. But I think for any campaigner or anyone who's trying to understand the environmental element of this, it must read for a real sour taste this morning when we're also talking about ways in which we can also conserve our own energy.
Well, presumably these flights are losing money.
Of course, but the airlines have been losing money constantly. It's been an incredibly difficult time. And again, we need to see that rallying in terms of travel spend, which is happening, thankfully, for the airlines to keep going. So, I mean, do we look at the airlines or do we look at the actual rules and the systems that they were trying to adhere to?
Yeah, very interesting point. Yeah. Kate Hardcastle, Oscar Redrop, good to see you both this morning. We'll catch up a little bit later on for you. The camera won't move away from you, Oscar.
Loves you so much. We had you envision there.
Tell me something I don't know.
Right, we're going to turn our attention now to the issue of housing. A disabled man says he's been forced to sleep on his bathroom floor for the past 7 years because his local housing authority has failed to fix mould and damp problems in his bedroom.
Well, Baldev Mai from West London has spina bifida and says conditions in his flat make it difficult to breathe. He says his complaints have been ignored for more than 20 years.
Our reporter Alice Porter went to have a look, and just a quick warning for those of you watching at home, this report contains some images you may find distressing.
Imagine sleeping on this floor every night. That's been a reality for Baldev Mahe, while his son sleeps in the sitting room of their one-bedroom flat.
When it rains, the whole place smells so bad. When it dries out from outside, the whole place smells of bad damp. So whatever happens from outside is happening inside. And I've been complaining and telling him that as well, but they've ignored it.
This is the master bedroom. This is where you should be sleeping.
I'm supposed to be sleeping here, but like you see, I mean, like, this actually grows. This will end up happening to your clothing, your bedding, everything. It's disgusting. The only one thing I can say is poorly ventilated flat.
It is. I have to say, it is, being in here, it feels incredibly cold. Yes, it's February, but it is the difference of when you walk in here. It is an incredibly chilly flat, but it's also, there's just this musty smell throughout all of it, which you just know it's damp.
Yeah. The window's broken. It's been like that for a long time, and it does not close at all.
Baldev has developed skin problems and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. His doctors say the damp in the flat affects his breathing. This is one of the many doctors' letters that your GPs have written to the housing company. So this one, and this is back in August of 2019. He is in desperate need of a change of accommodation. His accommodation is inadequate, which is too hot in summer and too cold in winter. He just not has heating or cooling, and the ventilation is very poor. He has mould and damp, which is affecting his breathing. I mean, to have repeated doctors writing on your behalf and that not making any difference, What kind of impact has that had on your mental health?
They took my life because I had enough. They don't care.
Problems with London's social housing has been highlighted over the last few months by Kwejo Tweneboa, who uses social media to name and shame housing companies.
People fail to forget we were in a lockdown not long ago, and these people were forced to stay in there and in their homes day in, day out. So even for some of the cases I've been in and I've suffered with disrepair, I can only imagine what that would have been like for some of the people that I've come across, being in this case, being in that environment where it's absolutely stuffy, you can barely breathe in the house because of such poor ventilation. It's a living nightmare for loads and loads of people.
Catalyst Housing say they agree that the conditions in Mr Marhay's flat are unacceptable. They've temporarily moved him into a hotel and have offered him an alternative one-bedroom home. But he says it's not suitable.
I've got a son at the day, I'm entitled to 2-bedroom. Having a 1-bedroom, it'd be no good. It makes you upset. Basically, powerless. Powerless, you can't do nothing.
Alice Porter, GB News.
Unbelievable.
Shocking. We talked to Kwejo yesterday, didn't we? An inspirational young fella, so hopefully he's making a difference.
Yeah, we got a lot of emails actually in about what he was talking about yesterday, so do let us know if the stories have been affecting you. We'd love to hear from you.
Now, Her Majesty the Queen has cancelled virtual engagements as she's still experiencing mild cold-like symptoms after contracting coronavirus on Sunday. However, she is still expected to have a phone call today with the Prime Minister.
Sarah Robertson is a royal and entertainment reporter for the Sunday Mirror. Pleased to say she joins us this morning. Good morning to you, Sarah. So look, it sounds as though Her Majesty, although the symptoms are mild and she's trying to continue her light duties, isn't completely without effect from this infection.
Yes, it's been a little bit of a setback for the Queen since the announcement on Sunday that she was had tested positive with COVID. You know, we were told at the beginning of the week that she was doing well. I mean, I think that still continues to be the case. They have said this is a mild infection that she's suffering with, but before she was meant to be, you know, carrying out her virtual engagement, but Buckingham Palace have issued the statement to say they have been cancelled for this week, and the Queen continues to recuperate at Windsor Castle, where she's living. She's still going to carry out her light duties. That means what I said to you on Monday. You know, she's just going to carry on reading through her documents, her personal and you know, official letters. So those official duties she can do, you know, while resting in the castle. But in terms of her virtual engagements and, you know, the Prime Minister's meeting by telephone, that's not going to go ahead this week. And I think that's in order to allow the Queen, you know, to enable to rest properly and have that recuperation that she needs.
Yeah, quite right. So as she's recuperating and resting, the Duchess of Cambridge is...
sliding.
Yeah, she's sliding. I mean, some great pictures coming out of Denmark.
Yes, well, here we see Kate Middleton, Duchess of Cambridge, or Catherine Middleton, shall I say, because I know people don't like her being referred to as Kate. Catherine Middleton, in her element. Look at her. She's having an absolute whale of a time there. She looked really happy,
who are
really
listening on the
excited.
radio, sorry to interrupt you, Sarah, just so people, you know at home, if they're listening on the radio or in the car, wherever they are, that was a picture of Kate going down a slide yesterday.
Yes, I had envy, but I don't know if you agree with me, Isabel. It really reminded me of when we saw Princess Diana. Remember when she went on the log flume with the boys? And you just saw that Diana would always get stuck in, wouldn't she? And would be really sort of hands-on, you know, when attending these public engagements. So there was just something about Kate there. She looked very joyful and playful and at ease. And she really just has come into her own since turning 40 and shaping up to be the future Queen. It was just lovely to see her. As I say, she looked very happy. She joked that, obviously being around children, she said, you know, when she sees babies, Prince William worries when she comes home because she gets very broody, and he worries that she's going to want another one. So I thought, is that a hint that we might have a fourth child? I mean, the Queen had 4, and I've always wondered if maybe the Duchess of Cambridge might have another. So hold this space. Maybe she might talk William into it. But also, what I loved as well about these images is we saw Kate in trousers, so she was, you know, dressed very kind of polished and sophisticated, but at the same time practical. Like she was there on, you know, to mean business when she went, and she had this lovely red blazer on, which looked so expensive. But again, Kate's showing that she is the queen of cheap chic. That blazer was only $59.99 from Zara. So she's mixing up these high street pieces again and showing that, she can mix high street with high fashion and make it look elegant and effortless. And she's in touch with the public, because not everyone can afford these really expensive clothes. We know that. But it just, she shows that you can still look polished and stylish, but on a budget.
She could look good in a bin bag, to be fair.
You could. I mean,
so
Isabel wears very cheap, and you look all right. You look all right.
I'm making a note. This is the third insult of the morning.
Very good. Look, we've got interesting. We talk about the Queen's Jubilee.
Yeah, it's not long.
Well, it's interesting because it's
100 days.
Part of it. It's already happened. I mean, since she acceded to the throne, it's already happened. But 100 days to the sort of official start of the celebrations.
Yes. So 100 days. What we're going to see is national charities have said that they're going to honour the Queen starting from June the 2nd. So this is when I say national charities. This is the Girl Guides, Walking with the Wounded, the National Trust, and they're taking part in the Beacons event. And this starts on June the 2nd, which obviously marks the Platinum Jubilee bank holiday, which is exciting. We get a big bank holiday. And they're going to light 70 beacons around the United Kingdom. So there will be lights at the highest points of each of the four nations of the United Kingdom. And I think this is just lovely, to sort of, obviously they're marking the Queen's Jubilee and what she means to them. And I just think it's a really, really lovely thing that we're seeing, for this occasion.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it, since the nations come together and had a big royal knees up. I think, was it, the street parties, I think, for Harry and Meghan's wedding was the last time there was a big sort of national celebration.
Yes.
I think with everything we've been through, with the pandemic and, I suppose the cost of living on the horizon, we really do need that feel-good factor, don't we? And I'm sure it will bring that, Sarah.
Yes, well, it reminds me a little bit of when we had the Olympics. Remember, there was that incredible year when we had the London Olympics, and we had the same thing. Beacons were lit across the UK, and it just felt like it brought everybody together in the country. And I think right now, when the UK, having come out of the pandemic, and without being too controversial here, I feel the UK is very divided at the moment as a nation, and I think we need something like this. When we had the Olympics and everybody just came together united, I feel that's going to be the same this year for the Platinum Jubilee, and things like this to mark the Queen's 70 years on the throne. The charities coming together, the lighting of the beacons, everybody excited about having a big bank holiday, lots of parties. We're going to really see the nation come together. Well, that's what I hope for. I'm going to remain positive.
Let's hope so. Sarah Robertson, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. If you're planning a street party, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let us know.
Coming up, we'll have all the latest on the West response to Putin's actions in Ukraine. But first, here's your Wednesday forecast.
Good morning. The winds will again be picking up today and potentially causing some problems. We have more Met Office warnings in place. Wet weather for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A mostly dry day for England and Wales. Now, this time yesterday, we had a weather front slipping south, and we've got almost a repeat performance today. But this one's really introducing some much colder air. And behind this cold front, we're going to see things turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Initially, though, that'll just be a band of rain with some hill snow mixed in. The wind's picking up. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place through today across southeast Scotland and northeast England, with those gusts likely to reach 40, 50 or 60 miles an hour. After recent storms, that could cause some issues. Quite a wet day then for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland. For England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers, but generally it's dry and still pretty mild here, 10, 11 degrees Celsius. But the colder air is pushing in behind this rain band, and we have a Met Office warning in place for the combination of snow and wind across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The snow showers really getting going overnight. We could easily see covering several centimetres, even at low levels, and quite a bit more than that over the hills. It'll be rain that pushes south across England and Wales, but the showers following on across northern England, likely to have a wintry mix in here too. And the warning is still in place for much of Thursday as the winds start to whip up once more. blowing the snow around, so a combination of snow and wind blizzards makes for some pretty grim travelling conditions during tomorrow across western Scotland, even central and eastern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it'll start wet across the southeast. It then turns brighter with sunny spells, just a sprinkling of showers, snow on the hills across northern England for sure. But it will be blustery once more, and that's going to make it feel cold through tomorrow. Temperatures only 6 or 7 for many of us. Add on that wind, it will feel much colder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, your radio and online. So wherever you are this morning, you can take us with you.
Well, here's what's coming up for you. Ukraine's foreign minister has warned no sanctions will be enough until Russia leaves Ukraine after Putin sent tanks into the eastern part of the country. The UK, the US, the EU, Canada and Australia have all announced new sanctions.
And we'll find out what the economic fallout of the crisis in Ukraine means for you at home when you're already facing the cost of living squeeze.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister will face the Commons later at Prime Minister's questions, where the Ukraine crisis and the end of coronavirus restrictions tomorrow are sure to dominate the debate.
Plus, we're joined by a real-life hero. That's an RAF veteran, Jordan Losman, who saved the life of a 96-year-old woman during Storm Dudley.
Well, don't forget, we want to hear from you this morning. Anything you want to talk about, drop us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So our top story today, the UK, US, Canada and Australia, among others, have announced new sanctions against Russia after it sent tanks into the eastern regions of Ukraine. The US President, Joe Biden, called it the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine.
Well, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has this report.
Heading for the border of eastern Ukraine, Russian tanks and other military vehicles in a move that Western leaders have long warned of. Moscow says this operation is not an invasion, but a stabilisation mission aimed at protecting the Russian-backed separatists in the regions around the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk. Western condemnation has now been followed by a package of sanctions and a move by Germany to suspend operations to bring Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline into service. In Brussels, NATO's Secretary-General said it wasn't too late for Moscow to pull back from the brink.
I welcome the economic sanctions announced today by many NATO allies and the decision by the German government that it cannot certify the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We urge Russia in the strongest possible terms to choose the path of diplomacy.
In the Ukrainian army trenches overlooking this disputed territory, the situation is extremely tense, with claims rebel groups have stepped up their shelling to instigate a response.
The enemy has been using its heavy weaponry against us. They are always ready to provoke us, blame us for their actions, so that we answer by shooting at them.
In recent days, several Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. This funeral in Kiev for an intelligence officer who died in shelling at the border over the weekend. In Donetsk, scenes of celebration here in this rebel-held city. There is widespread support for the prospect of Russian troops on these streets, but there are also some who are uneasy.
It is such a bleak environment at the moment. I don't know how good the decision is and if it will lead to peace. Now everyone is very worried. Everyone is being taken away from their fathers, brothers, husbands. In fact, everyone is very scared.
It is very important for all of us that peace will finally come to Donetsk and to Luhansk. We just want peace and calm. For us, it is very important. We want to live as one big family together with Russia.
With the Russian parliament having formally ratified Vladimir Putin's request to use troops in eastern Ukraine, the scene is now set for what the West believes is an inevitable incursion into Ukrainian territory. How far these troops advance is the big unknown. Mark White, GB News.
Well, for more on this, let's turn to former infantry commander and chairman of the Cobra Intelligence Group, Colonel Richard Kemp. Very warm welcome back to the programme. Look, listen, lots of concerns then about whether these sanctions have gone far enough or fast enough. Do you think they'll have a big impact on Putin?
I don't think they will, no. I think that it's good to see that there's been immediate action, but I think it does need to be stronger, and including stronger from Britain, to sanction a number of Russian banks and a relatively small number of people who are already sanctioned in the United States is not that powerful. I think it needs to be much wider, much stronger sanctions, which directly target Putin. Putin should be sanctioned. We should be considering also moves like throwing out from Britain the Russian ambassador, cutting off diplomatic relations. I think the time has come to really flex our diplomatic muscles, even if we can't flex our military muscles. And we should be trying to push back on Russia anywhere that it raises its head, anywhere in the world. It should become, this should become a new situation now, not something like followed the Crimean invasion in 2014, where a few token sanctions were thrown out and then it was all forgotten about.
Colonel, you say we can't flex our military muscles. I mean, the US announced last night, President Biden said they're going to send more troops in to support NATO allies in the region. I mean, we could do that, couldn't we?
I think we could do that. We should do that. And to an extent, we are doing that. We're sending troops to Poland. We've already got troops in the Baltic states. We should reinforce the numbers there. That's exactly what Putin doesn't want to happen. But when I said we can't really flex our military muscles, I was talking about deploying combat troops into Ukraine. What we should be doing, however, is we should now be producing more weapons support. We should be delivering more weapons to Ukraine. We should be providing more assistance with intelligence, with surveillance, and if we can, with special forces as well, to hit the Russians on behalf of Ukraine. I don't think we can deploy, I don't think there is the political will to deploy large-scale combat troops to Ukraine in the present situation, but we should do everything we can short of that.
How frustrated are you over the UN situation? Because the United Nations, in the midst of all of this, I mean, they had a meeting the other night, but they are just absolutely impotent.
Yeah, I think that's true of the United Nations in situations of this sort. I don't think we've ever seen them becoming really effective, and that's why it's so important that countries like Great Britain, which I think have taken a strong line all the way through this particular crisis, and the US need to act more strongly. In my view, the reaction from Europe prior to this occurring and to the US has been less strong than it should have been. And I think when you look at threats like German threat the German Chancellor, what he should have done is to permanently cancel Nord Stream 2, which is an important source of funding for Russia. He should have cancelled that rather than just say it's suspended. So I think we need we need a great deal of stronger measures, but we should also be looking at, in this situation, I think, at China, because of course China has a hand in this, and it's China that will be, I think, to some extent, making up for any severe damage that's done to the Russian economy by Western sanctions, and we should therefore be looking at moving against China as well, I think, in this situation.
Finally, can I just ask you how much you think our hands are tied in the UK by the way defence spending has been curtailed over recent years? I mean, Ben Wallace has seen his budget shrinking and shrinking. You talk about sending more military hardware over to the Baltic states, but of course there's a limit to how much we're able to do that. Do we need to increase our defence spend, do you think, in the face of this threat?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Even if we aren't going to deploy large-scale combat forces to Ukraine, as you say, we should be delivering weapons. We should certainly be delivering large numbers of weapons. We should be reinforcing our presence in NATO countries in the east. And I think above all, it's a lack of resolve by the British government, by other governments around the world in NATO, even more so, apart from the United States, to maintain a significant defence force. That is a green light to people like Putin. They can see, by the fact that we've constantly cut our armed forces, they can see we don't really take defence seriously, and they then act accordingly. We're not providing the level of deterrence that we should be doing. So yes, the direct answer to your question is we should certainly increase defence expenditure now and build up the size of our armed forces again.
OK, really good to talk to you. Colonel Richard Kemp, former chairman of Cobra and, of course, head of the British Army in Afghanistan. Always good to have you on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've sent a lot of NLAWs out there, which are the light anti-tank missiles, sort of more shoulder launch things. But we've also sent quite a lot, not as many, of the javelins. They're 85 grand a pop. It's a one-time fire weapon at £85,000 a time. Hugely expensive. Costs a lot of money very quickly. Of course, it is PMQs today, so it's going to be a very busy one. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's here. I mean, clearly, we've got three big issues which have all got to dominate today, haven't we? And clearly the situation in Ukraine, clearly the cost of living crisis, and clearly the end of the coronavirus restrictions.
Certainly, and I think it's going to be the former that plays the biggest role here. It was interesting, the House of Commons yesterday. It seemed like it was a great matter of state in a way that sometimes the sort of Barneys in the House of Commons don't exactly rise to. But really what we had was all parties in the House of Commons, save for a few eccentric backbenchers of various parties, pushing in the same direction here. And it was interesting to see Sir Keir Starmer actually pushing for the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson, to go further in terms of sanctions against Russia, being stronger in his line in support of NATO and the West. Although this is where it comes into a tricky point for Britain and for Parliament, because ultimately what Number 10 has been aiming to do with these sanctions is walk in lockstep with partners in Europe and in the United States of America. There have been so many coordination calls between London and Washington and Brussels, trying to make these sanctions sort of mesh together. The UK going harder on the financials, Europe going harder on gas. These sort of things are coordinated. And so the UK spinning off and doing something unilaterally might undermine that effort of a united West.
OK, now, aside from all of those issues that are going to come up in Prime Minister's questions, there's also the never-ending issue of Partygate, which will presumably come up as well, back in the front pages of some of the newspapers, and talk that the Prime Minister could become the first ever in that role to be questioned under caution.
Well, a leak to ITV News yesterday revealed that the questionnaire did itself set out that this was a questionnaire carried out under caution. So, to some extent, even though he has not been spoken to verbally by the police, that questionnaire may well itself, under some interpretations, constitute Boris Johnson becoming the first Prime Minister in this country's history to have been questioned under caution by the police in some form. Now, that doesn't tell us anything new. We knew that he handed in that questionnaire at the end of last week. We knew that the questionnaire had gone out to various people accused of being at various parties. But we do now know the questions on that questionnaire. And actually, they're not terribly specific. Those questions are about which events did you attend, how long did you attend, and what reasonable excuse did you have for being at those events.
I know the word excuse coming up in a police questionnaire seems quite extraordinary to me.
Reasonable excuse. It does seem to give a lot of leeway to the lawyers.
How do you justify breaking the law?
It does seem to give a lot of leeway to the lawyers, particularly in the case of Boris Johnson, who, let's not forget, this was his house. Potentially, I don't think that it's out of the realms of possibility that Boris Johnson gets away with this without a fixed penalty notice.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Tom Harwood, always good to hear from you. Thank you. See you again shortly.
OK, let's bring you up to date with the main stories today. And the Foreign Secretary says nothing is off the table to stop President Putin's incursion into Ukraine. Writing in The Times, Liz Truss says the next package of sanctions has been discussed on a call with G7 allies. It says the White House says a proposed summit between President Biden and President Putin will no longer go ahead, and we'll talk to the Foreign Secretary later.
There's still no sign of normal weather just yet as the UK braces for more strong winds and now heavy snow amid flooding warnings. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for wind across North East England, Cumbria and North Yorkshire. A second warning for wind and snow has been issued for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland from later today.
Almost half of young people say the pandemic has left them feeling burnt out and experiencing feelings of self-loathing. The Prince's Trust surveyed 16 to 25-year-olds, discovering what they call an alarming downward spiral of anxiety, stress and lack of confidence for the future.
Around 1 million operations a year are cancelled or delayed due to a shortage of 1,400 NHS anaesthetists. The Royal College of Anaesthetists says that could rise to 8 million operations by 2040, with the staff shortfall set to reach 11,000 if action's not taken.
More than 8 in 10 Scots are worried about the soaring cost of energy on household budgets. A YouGov poll shows consumers in Scotland are concerned about the huge rise in prices set for April. Of course, that's not specific to Scotland, is it?
Well,
everyone's worried about that, I should think.
Yeah.
But I think those figures should reflect across the UK.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. To medical matters now. Experts are warning that patient care will be impacted if NHS staff are unable to access free COVID tests from April the 1st. In response, Health Secretary Sajid Javid has said the NHS has always made sensible decisions on testing and keeping their staff safe.
Well, let's talk to Tom Watson, chair of the Lab and Testing Industry Organisation, of course, former deputy leader of the Labour Party. He joins us now from Bewdley, which I think has been flood hit, hasn't it, Tom? I mean, look, in all of this, there's got to be sensible precautions around frontline staff, as there will be around those who are older and more vulnerable. They're not having these tests written off completely, are they?
You're right, Stephen. I mean, testing remains the antidote to lockdowns. So without a testing regime, there is always the chance that we could see a spike sooner in a new variant or an existing variant. The independent sector stands ready to fill the gap when free testing ends on April the 1st, because we know that there are a lot of workers that are still frightened to return to the workplace unless they know that they're going to be COVID-free. We know that there have been huge sectors of the economy that have remained open as a result of testing, film and television for one, air travel for another. So testing is not going to go away, but it's going to be the job of the independent sector to provide reliable PCR and lateral flow tests for sectors of the economy that require it.
And I suppose, it boils down to this argument that there is no such thing as a lateral flow test that is free. It's already cost the taxpayers £17 billion to be handing them out without a charge, and continues at £2 billion a month until they end on the 1st of April.
Yeah, I mean, it's right that obviously this is taxpayers' money that has paid for this. We've needed to do that. We've been in a global crisis, and it's right that the government are trying to scale down their commitment to that. I guess what everyone in the centre ground is saying is, let's try and do this sensibly. Let's not risk losing a new variant. We know that border control isn't just for illegal immigrants and contraband. It does block viruses. We know that other countries may increase their restrictions depending on their own public health advice. So there needs to be some kind of surge capacity, and the independent sector stands ready to scale up again if there's more worries with new variants or outbreaks. And we need to retain confidence in the testing regime itself. Otherwise, we're not going to get the millions of workers who are hybrid working or currently working from home back into the office and the workplace as quickly as the Chancellor wants them to be there.
I mean, does the lab and testing industry accept, though, that sort of universal testing, if you like, is now no longer necessary? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, the established members of the laboratory and testing industry organisation, most of them have filled the gap where the NHS didn't want to go. So a lot of international travel our members have been involved in. And we accept that, luckily, the current variant has not had the damage to personal health that people were worried about just before Christmas. But of course, it's our members that are also on the front line of this. They're the ones whose testing procedures help sequence the material tested, that helps us identify new sequences early. So I guess what we're saying is, yes, of course, it's absolutely right that the government tries to protect taxpayer interest in this. But if you go too soon, too quickly, there's a danger that we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I'm just curious, I don't know if you're able to give us an idea on this, but, has testing generated a bit of money for the UK economy, or have most of the tests being made in places like China?
A lot of the lateral flow tests are produced themselves. The actual test kits are made outside the UK, but obviously the IP and the knowledge and the experience is UK technicians and scientists. In fact, one of the things we're trying to say to the government is there's been a lot of learning in the last 12 months. A lot of the staff who work for our member organisations have skills they can perhaps give back to the government, helping them with diagnostic testing to deal with with the queue of operations and procedures that have been put on the back burner because of COVID. So we think that we've not just helped with the national effort to identify COVID and keep people safe, but we could help them with the national effort to get the backlog of NHS procedures down as quickly as possible.
Now that you're out of politics, as it were, can you give us a view on the Public Accounts Committee and what they've said? It's going to be about £370 billion that this whole pandemic has set us back. The Public Accounts Committee says, there's been too many opportunity for fraudsters when it comes to how a lot of these contracts have been given out and fulfilled. Do you think that is right? Do you think the government should be held to account for that? Or do we need to view this in the respect of having to act so very quickly to try to deal with this?
I've no doubt the Public Accounts Committee will be looking into that huge sum of money in the years ahead. And I'm sure when the government do their own public inquiry into COVID, they'll have to do that because there needs to be lessons learned. Because one thing we know for certain is there's another pandemic coming down the line at some point in the future. In fact, in the LTIO, the body I now work with, we've identified issues that we think could offer better value for money for consumers. One of the things the government do was, for example, print the price of PCR tests that people needed to get for international travel, and that led to some unscrupulous providers gaming the system and offering essentially poor, and deceitful marketing advice. All these lessons need to be learned, and whoever is in charge of civil contingencies in the years ahead will need to make sure that we don't make those errors again. Of course, the one thing I know from being a minister, though, when you're having to make life or death decisions about removing or keeping people's liberty on partial information, it's really tough. And they were making procurement decisions that would normally take government 6 months or 12 months to do, and they were having to do it in 6 or 12 hours. So I've got some sympathy with ministers who were sort of making life or death decisions early on in the pandemic. But nevertheless, the Public Accounts Committee is doing its job, and they will want to make sure there's value for money.
A very generous assessment there. Tom Watson, Chair of the LTIO and former Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Always good to have you on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's head back to the situation with Russia and Ukraine and how is this crisis affecting British businesses and the economy. Our economics and business editor Liam Halligan joins us now. Morning, Liam. Look, I mean, there is concern about how the UK is going to be affected here.
There certainly is, Stephen. You referred earlier to energy prices, the cost of living crisis that we focus on so heavily here on GB News, a big concern to our viewers. And on the strength of those escalation in Ukrainian, Russian incursions, if you like, oil prices spiked up. Russia is, of course, an energy superpower. Wholesale gas prices have increased over the last 24, 48 hours. And that will be felt on the forecourt when you fill up your van or car with petrol or diesel. It will be felt in those household utility bills. We already know there's a big spike coming in household utility bills in April as the energy regulator Ofgem raises that household price cap. We already know in April there's going to be more taxation, higher national insurance contributions, higher inflation in general. And now on top of all that, we're likely to have higher energy prices even than they would have been because Russia could easily retaliate on these sanctions that the UK, US and other Western countries have imposed. And even frankly, if the Russians don't retaliate, just the increase in tension, the increase in geopolitical turbulence always pushes up energy prices on global markets. And what happens on global markets, I'm afraid, affects all of us in our pocket.
Liam, thank you. Got to leave it there because Liam's going to be back with all full-depth analysis for you. On the Money, 1 o'clock today. Well, coming up.
We'll go together. All together now. Paul Coit is going to be in the studio with us for all the sports headlines.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 7:27, time for the sport. Paul Coit is in the studio with us. He's going to be talking to us all things Champions League.
Yes, Champions League is on. Chelsea, nice win for Chelsea yesterday. See, all the talk, as we were saying about yesterday, is about Romelu Lukaku. So Romelu Lukaku was taken out of the firing line yesterday because, quite frankly, he hasn't been firing. He hasn't actually been in the firing line even when he's been playing. So we're talking about a footballer worth about £100 million. It's just not working out for him. Had the least amount of touches recently in the Premier League game.
7 touches.
7 touches in a whole game.
Yeah.
This is almost up there when we were talking about actually getting paid for not being in a fight. It could actually work that way also
Paid
with
not to
football as
play.
well. Yeah, touch it 7 times. See, I don't know when they do that. I don't know whether they actually do it as in if you dribble the ball, that counts as 1 touch. Because
Or if
then
your
you
foot
could probably
loses
throw
contact,
yeah.
Price per touch.
I think price
I'd
per
like
touch.
to know
I
the
tell you
rate.
what, it really is price per touch. So, but anyway, it was a good result for Chelsea. Kai Havertz came in, replaced him, was very good. So 2-0, they beat Lille. Tonight, Atletico Madrid play Manchester United. Now, Manchester United, they're taking a lot of heat at the moment. There's the talk about the players that aren't getting on. We've got Ralph Rangnick in charge. But he's come up with a rather strange phrase that I've heard a few times in football. And that's he's saying that they're going to take the Champions League. So the Champions League is the ultimate when it comes to football. So this is the big European competition. But he's saying we're going to take it seriously. We're not going to be where we're going to just concentrate on the league, on the Premier League.
Right.
But what you do in the Premier League is you're actually trying to qualify for the Champions League. So they're not actually going to worry about the Champions League because they're too busy trying to qualify for the Champions League. This is something you hear in football all the time. And I've got to be honest with you, it makes 0 sense whatsoever.
Well, that's football for you. Meanwhile,
that's football for you.
In terms of the Champions League final, St. Petersburg, I mean, surely that can't be happening.
You know what? It's one of those. It's obvious that the first thing you're going to think of is, right, where's the... I mean, if you're in football, of course, is the Champions League is being played there. Probably time to move it. So I imagine that UEFA will always, whenever it comes up, if there's something's got to be moved, we've had different reasons for things being moved. We know what the reason for this one is. So probably Wembley Stadium, I would imagine. It's usually the go-to.
It is interesting seeing how this story that's on the front pages is conflating with the backstory at the moment. We talk about Chelsea Football Club and all the Russian money there as well. I mean, it's so funny, isn't it, seeing these two worlds collide and how the sporting world has to respond to this threat from Russia.
Well, there's a lot of money that comes from Russia. And the thing is, we can talk about the sporting world, we can talk about everything. So it's going to affect everybody and everything in some way. So obviously football is going to be affected by that. Roman Abramovich, of course, owns Chelsea. How is that going to affect things? Aeroflot are one of their sponsors as well. But there's many other clubs and there's many other sports.
Gazprom on the sides of all the stadiums as well.
Everywhere you look. So it really is literally watch this space at the moment. We'll see what happens.
Paul, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Well, stay with us because coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're joined by a real-life hero, former RAF veteran Jordan Losman. We'll tell you why he's a hero in a minute.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 7:32. You're watching Breakfast and perhaps listening on GB News. We're live on your TV and on your radio this morning.
Let's have a look at the newspapers for you today. We'll start with the Mail, saying President Biden's comments that the world is on the brink of war as Russia prepared for a full-scale assault on Ukraine.
The Guardian's reporting that Putin has said Russia will support the territorial claims of its proxy states in Donetsk and Luhansk.
For the Metro, says we'll grab him by the rubles and leave the Russian Federation a pariah state.
Following up on that, the Mirror reports MPs and activists have called for a clampdown on London being used to launder Russian money.
Well, let's move away from that situation just a little bit for the next few minutes as we go through the papers in a bit more detail with retail expert Miss Kate Hardcastle and former Conservative Redwall advisor Oscar Redrop. Good to see you both this morning. Oscar, we'll kick off with the Times, should we, and social media skills.
Yeah, this is a story of a 60-year-old marketing executive who it's been deemed, and I think, absolutely, spot on here, was unfairly dismissed by a holiday park company after her bosses decided that she was poor at winning, likes on social media. I just felt like I wanted to pick this story out because on behalf of young people, I just want everyone to know that we're not all like that. Like we're not, I found it so abhorrent that I imagine, at her age, as a marketing assistant, has built up a real great range of experience. And for her to be dismissed because it was a very specific campaign, didn't get enough likes on Twitter. I just think that is, if that's where the world is at the moment, I want no part of it whatsoever. And we've actually discussed, I remember last time, the ageism in the workplace. And actually, I think it's so, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts as well on this. I think it's so important in any company or business. I mean, as a business leader, sorry, as an older lady. As a business leader, I think the transfer of kind of knowledge between young and old is, absolutely essential.
And Twitter, Kate, is that sort of thing you do on your phone, apparently?
OK, right. I don't have a phone, Stephen. I am from Yorkshire and also old.
I should point out that you might be old, but younger than me.
Oh,
so there
bless
you go.
you. Thanks for that bit of reassurance this morning.
We should also point out that Kate is all over social media in every capacity.
And that never stops. What do you mean? Unless she was employed specifically as a social media marketing campaigner, this seems very, very unfair.
Can I just get on my soapbox for a minute?
Yeah.
We must avoid this permafrost thing that's going on between young generation and old generation in the workplace. Every skill set blended together, if proven, can make for a much more harmonious workplace. And that goes ditto for diversity and inclusion. As a woman who has fought for her place in many boardrooms, I think we have to accept that actually the answer isn't just it's all about social media now in marketing. It is about brand reputation. It's about common sense, Stephen and Isabel, those things that we kind of know about. There's so much you can get from collaboration and working together. So I think we're going to cover a round of stories here, which actually there's one common theme, which is a bit of a PR disaster, really. And we've got an expert here talking about PR, but this goes so much deeper. Consumers have the power of the wallet and purse to change your fortunes as a company. So make these bad moves at your peril.
OK. Kate, you've chosen the story in the Mail I want to turn to now, which is an ultimate case, I suppose, of hypocrisy. We've been talking a lot this morning about the cost of living, people choosing between heating and eating. What has this boss of an energy firm been saying and doing?
So, as I said, people have got the power to change your position as a business. And this is Stephen Fitzpatrick. He is the founder of OVO Energy. It's the third largest, I think, energy provider in the UK. Now, he went out with some advice when there was this concern around the cost of fuel increases, saying perhaps cuddling a pet or a star jump might be the way to feel warmer in your home. But indeed, himself has invested in a £1,200 wood burner. Now, Stephen, Mr. Fitzpatrick, buy as many wood burners as you like, but also do have a conversation with your PR team, hoping there's one in place. This type of conversation, no matter how much it's taken out of context, really does matter. We have people who are going into food banks, dual income households for the first time, not able to make the decision between trying to get the groceries bought and trying to pay the fuel bill. This is not the mood music that people want to hear.
Also, how do we know he's bought a wood burner for 1,200 quid? So he's not put it on Twitter, has he? Look at my lovely new wood burner.
The story doesn't say, but as I'm older, I probably don't understand.
No. Well, me neither.
No.
Neither. But you do wonder how it's got out, because he must have told someone who's bought this fancy wood burner.
Maybe he's done a nice Instagram post, I don't know, but the fact of the matter is that, he shouldn't be going out there saying one thing and doing another. This is an important role you have. You are the leader of the steerer of the ship.
You know what they say? Up north, do as I say, not as I do.
Well, they might say that in your world.
Well, but that's the hypocrisy of it all, isn't it?
You've absolutely got to be true, authentic, respectful. We're in a new generation of business now.
Yeah. Oscar, this is an interesting story, page 2 of The Times, talking about mental health. I mean, we talk a lot about waiting lists at the moment, the concerns about the state of the National Health Service, but is this quite a positive story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, because of the bandwidth, as you just described, I kind of reserve judgment on this to see if it can actually be implemented and followed through. But the NHS, are planning to allow, particularly acute mental health situations for patients to be seen by a professional or a practitioner within an hour. And that is, I think that is real progress. As a young man, and I don't want to again overplay it, but I have definitely had relatively prolonged periods of time where mental health has been something I've had to be conscious of in my life, and I just thought that was, I think it's a really important first step. I know like snowflake generation and all that kind of stuff, and easily being offended. And I think I'm no fan of that at all. But there's a real separation there. We're talking now about Sajid Javid yesterday, even saying, the COVID plan moving forward is, if you feel unwell, don't go into work. And I feel like, of course, that extends to physical conditions, but it should apply to mental health conditions as well. It can be ultimately debilitating, and I think the NHS really kind of setting this kind of KPI, if you like, I think it shows a real sign of progress.
But is there a problem that you do get a situation if you've got a mental health problem, it should be addressed. Totally agree. But don't we get the point when you talk about the snowflakes, where there's people sort of going, I'm feeling a bit fed up today. I'm mentally unwell.
Yeah, and I absolutely, there is zero time for that. The economy as we know it now is absolutely in kind of battle mode, and we all need to be kind of turning up, working as hard as we can. But when it comes to acute moments, all the support in the world needs to be there.
Well, let's not forget that the biggest cause of death in young men is suicide, and it's incredibly powerful. You admitting to having battled with mental health problems, and people at home will really benefit from hearing you say that.
The odd thing about that is that it's actually something that I don't know why I've just felt more comfortable saying that on TV with you now than I actually have with some of my mates.
Yeah, well, it's not an easy thing to admit to, so that's really good.
Maybe you need to do some singing. No, seriously.
That would not help anyone.
Because in The Guardian, do you know what? I'm not surprised at this, Kate, that it triggers certain things in the brain. If you have a good sing-song, even if you can't hold a tune like me, you do feel better after it.
I want to bring it into the discussion point because it's one of those stories that, although it's got a great place in The Guardian, probably hasn't been picked up. It's a study that shows that actually the neurology, the brain is just an amazing, fantastic machine that I think we all take for granted every day. My daughter's got a neurological condition and I've learnt so much more about it than I perhaps would have ever appreciated. And this study and this research from the US basically says when we sing, or indeed any noises, it stimulates the brain differently. So think about actually what good we can do, actually. If you create that noise that so many of us are fortunate to be born with, whether it's in tune or out of tune, it can be an uplifter, it can make you feel better. And I think we have natural remedies within our bodies where we can actually stimulate and change our mood, can't we, through how we act, how we stimulate, like walking, just going for a walk, forget the gyms and everything else. Getting out in the open air is a massive health boost and kick.
You started your career, didn't you, in the music industry singing? I wonder if you've used that with your daughter. Yeah, that's how you met your husband.
Yeah.
She's a good singer.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first career. Worked out well for me, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I did meet my husband, who's a drummer there, and I have absolutely been using music therapy because music therapy, and I just got to say, there's a charity called Nod Off Robbins. They supply music therapists all throughout the UK, doing amazing things in hospitals. And when you watch the transformational effect of it, it is awesome.
Yeah. Then.
Yeah, I will not embarrass all three of my children doing that, but off camera, delighted to. Shall we start with Tina Turner? Bit of Proud Mary?
Let's do it.
I'm singing in the rain.
You think you feel better already,
He is
don't
actually
you?
a really good singer as well. I'm not going to be...
I do feel a little bit better for that, actually. Look, we're going to shut you two out for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Oscar and Kate.
Don't go too far, because we'll speak to you a little bit later on. I can't speak this one. I'm on day 6.
It's all right. Yeah, fair enough.
I'm on day 6, another 4 to go.
Coffee for one over here. Meanwhile, we're going to talk about rugby. Calls are growing for the Welsh rugby team, the Welsh Rugby Union, I should say, to, what is it exactly? Review their policy on admitting women into the Welsh rugby team. But unfortunately, it's been sort of a bit under wraps, hasn't it? They wield an awful lot of power in Wales because I suppose the sport is like a religion in Wales. Let's go to Lily Hewitson, who can give us this exclusive.
No idea what you said then.
Politicians, parents and players are demanding more answers from the Welsh Rugby Union. They want to know exactly why, at the time these young girls have to play for their mixed rugby teams, are being cut short this year. Now, the girls have always known that once they've outgrown their under-13 squad, they'd have to move into a women's-only rugby team. However, some are upset that a decision has been made prematurely for them without their consultation. Now, the girls and their families say the decision hasn't been made based on... Sorry? Well, the girls have said, and their families have said, the decision hasn't been made based on their height, their weight, their age, or for safety purposes. They're concerned that it's been made because of their gender. Now, the committees of rugby clubs across Wales were asked about this rule change, but the girls themselves were not. Now, the member of the Senedd for Bridgend and Porthcawl, Sarah Murphy, is one of the people who's been asking for more answers from the Welsh Rugby Union. She's heard from the concerns of a number of children in her constituency who are players for mixed rugby teams.
Decisions shouldn't be made about a group, whether that's children, whether that's based on gender, whether that's based on any protected characteristic that will impact them without getting their views on that and their feedback on that. I think obviously it's particularly sad because they are children and they love rugby. And one of the things that Alicia May's mother, Cheryl, said to me was that Alicia May had felt like a real sense of acceptance from playing mixed rugby. And when I asked both the girls, why do you like playing mixed rugby? They were like, because it's rougher and because it's a higher standard at that age, you know? And so I have to feel, and I have, you know, I've had a meeting with 2 representatives from the WIU, and I did say, you have made this decision, though, based on their gender, not on their ability, not on their age. You have made this purely based on their gender. And that's what's so significant here, when you hear from the girls themselves and how that has made them feel, how that has made them question themselves, and how, I suppose, valued they are to the WIU.
Now, I also had a chat to Jackie. Her daughter, Evelyn, is the captain of a mixed under-12s rugby team in Bridgend. Now, Evelyn has been told that she can no longer play for the rugby team that she's been a part of since she was 5.
There's just an overwhelming sense of, for her and those girls, that they're powerless in this decision. You know, that I think is really, really horrible. And it's powerlessness that teaches her that the system is sort of stacked against her potentially, and her voice is not worth anything. And I think that is a really dangerous message, and a really contrary message to where we are as a nation, as a society right now. There is certainly a risk to Welsh women's rugby long term. The girls that have played, who have committed, who have done everything right on a rugby pitch and in a rugby team, instead of getting their support, that there's, at 12 and 13, the game of rugby is pretty physical, and they've committed and they've got to the point where they are absolutely valued member of a team. They're not being allowed just because of because there's only a few girls playing. It seems a very strange notion to me, and I don't think it's fair just on the basis of your gender, which is irrelevant in the middle of a rugby match, I can promise. When you can tackle as hard and as relentlessly as Evie and turn over rucks and everything else, your gender's just not a thing. These girls are choosing to be on that pitch and they're giving their all, right? So I have to say that the coaches have been really sad that this decision has been made, that none of them can understand it. It just seems a very strange decision to have made because the girls hold their own. Now, there might be low numbers, but they are, you don't get to be captain of a 25-strong squad if you're not a value-add player, right?
Now, in a statement, the Welsh Rugby Union told me the decision to lower the maximum age for mixed rugby from 13 to 11 was made following a period of consultation and because of a drop in female participation. During the season, girls moved to under 12 mixed rugby. Now, they say the new age banding is the best model for the WRU, given the additional opportunities which are now in place for the female game.
Interesting. Little exclusive from you there, Lily. Thank you very much.
Now, an RAF veteran who saved the life of a 96-year-old woman has been, quite rightly, hailed a hero by doctors.
So ex-soldier Jordan Losman from Darlington was leaving his home during Storm Dudley when his fiancée, Katie Walker, noticed a figure lying on the ground further down the street.
Well, yes, not soldier. It's in the RAF.
Oh.
I know. Sorry, just to point that out, because that matters, Jordan, doesn't it? It matters. Look, it's an amazing story. Tell us what happened.
Sorry, the signal's really bad.
Okay,
Oh, we should say you're on an oil rig, so there might be some issues with connection. Can you hear us, Jordan?
Yeah, that's better now.
Oh,
okay.
fantastic.
Yeah, OK, tell us what happened.
Yeah, so we were driving out the village, and my partner noticed that there was somebody on the floor. It appeared to be an elderly lady. So we stopped the car and went over to check on how she was. She appeared to have quite a severe head trauma.
Oh dear, what a
call! So called the ambulance. We then went over and assessed the lady again, made sure that she was talking, that she was conscious, that she was responsive. And then we spoke to the ambulance service and they said that it could be up to 2 hours or an hour, depending on what was happening with the storm. So the decision was made to put the lady into the car. We put her in and drove her there as effectively and as safely as we could because she was starting to deteriorate. And when we got her to the hospital, then the paramedics told us that by bringing her in so quickly, it had potentially saved her life. So...
Well, look, a fantastic thing to do. Is it just a bit of your former training kicking in, do you think? I mean, you guys don't mess about when there's an emergency.
Yeah, I think it's down to the training, but also it was the people that were there with us. I'd like to say that without them, it wouldn't have been possible. Everybody helped, and we were just one cog in a machine, really. We had people getting blankets. We positioned the car to shelter her from the weather. That was what my partner done. My partner then spoke to her all the way back to keep her responsive, and everybody in the whole village mucked in, and just without them, it wouldn't have been possible. So it certainly wasn't just me.
It was a real good Samaritan moment for you when you stopped when you saw this happen. What is the advice? What do you do if somebody has a serious head injury? I mean, of course, 2 hours we know is just not sustainable if somebody's, especially at that age, 96. So what did you do? And obviously, it must have been difficult getting her into the car, but what were your sort of basic approaches to this situation?
The basic approach that I always have, and it's just something I've learned over the years, is you just have to see it as something that needs moving in this occasion from A to B, and try not to get too emotionally attached. I mean, I for one, get quite emotional. Even things on TV, I can watch it and cry. I'll openly admit that. But you have to just distance yourself to make it as effective as possible. But if you're not happy with what to do in a medical situation, sometimes just being the person to talk to them and to reassure them and to make them know that somebody's there, that can be just as effective as giving treatment, if that's all that you're able to do.
I love the fact, John, a lot of it is that sort of common sense, and you just put it to action in the very best way. But I've got to ask you, you're somewhere in the North Sea, aren't you?
Yeah, I've just came off a night shift, actually. Usually I don't look this bad. But, yeah, I've just finished a 12-hour shift, so we're in the Norwegian sector, so it's eventful.
Is it a bit blustery out there, to say the least?
To say the least, yeah, it is a little bit blustery.
Well, Jordan Losman, look, we love to hear from people who've been in the forces who aren't too tough to admit that they can have a good cry. I'm exactly the same. Journalists aren't supposed to get emotionally attached, but I just got goosebumps hearing you talking about that story. Always keep that about you. That's what made you a real-life hero. Pleasure to talk to you this morning.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Yeah, get some sleep. Poor fella, get some sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love the fact we can talk to someone in the middle of the North Sea. Well, the Norwegian sector of the North Sea. Amazing. And
so many layers to that. I'm thinking about the Ukraine situation and gas and oil and everything else, but we're trying not to make every... Yeah, no, but let's get on to that. We've had lots of views in this morning about the situation. What they're saying, Stephen?
Nord Stream 2 is what Germany has suspended, but Tony says Nord Stream 1 is pumping a lot of gas to Germany as normal. Germany is getting the same gas from Russia today as it was yesterday, and Germany's only paused Nord Stream 2, not abandoned it.
Although Dmitry Medvedev has come out, he's in charge of security in Russia, and said that they're going to double the price of gas going through Nord Stream 1, so it will have a direct impact on Germany, at the least, to receive, I think it's over half of their gas from Russia. Les says if Ukraine had been a member of NATO, then this action by Russia wouldn't have happened. Well, I could say that it wouldn't have been a threat either.
it wouldn't have been quite the same, would it? But the minute Ukraine joined NATO, what would Russia have done? Because that's the one thing they really didn't want. And so that would have caused problems whenever that had happened. And there's no getting away from that. Simon, I love it when you just throw your common sense at us. This is sensible. Simon says, if you back a rat into a corner and it sees no room to escape, no matter your size, it will fly at you. For Putin at this stage, there must be an escape route.
Paul says this is a wake-up call to the rest of Europe to become less dependent on Russian energy and coal, and lots of people saying the same thing, and not least that, no one's really talking about this, but it's going to have an impact on defence spending at a time when we can least afford it. So lots of worries coming out of this.
Billy says, given the historically poor effectiveness of sanctions, are the ones against Russia designed to hurt or merely show our annoyance? I think probably the annoyance. If it's the former, they'll have to get much deeper. If it's the latter, it's virtue signalling. And DB has tweeted and said, what exactly will these sanctions achieve? Where is the measurement and impact analysis?
Tony says President Putin is laughing at our sanctions. Russia is sanction-proof. Chris says, why are we getting involved? Keep your thoughts coming in. We love to hear from you throughout the morning. A few people commenting on the fact that we're sitting on different sides this morning. Les says, fabulous humour, always positive. Either chair doesn't matter. You are both great this morning. We always like to read out the odd positive
nice
email
one.
as well. Yeah,
I've had a tweet directly to my account, actually, which I don't look at very often, from the chosen one, Duchess of Pigs. Morning to you, chosen one. He says, Stephen, darling, you're an absolute delight. And me and my 78-year-old mother watch you on GB News, and we think you are simply lovely. I wish you were right.
Shame about the woman sitting next to you.
Yeah.
Look, lots more coming your way this morning. Stay with us at 8 o'clock. We're going to be hearing from the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tom Tugendhat. And then at 9 o'clock, we're going to be joined by the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. But first of all, here's your Wednesday forecast.
Good morning. The winds will again be picking up today and potentially causing some problems. We have more Met Office warnings in place. Wet weather for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A mostly dry day for England and Wales. Now, this time yesterday, we had a weather front slipping south, and we've got almost a repeat performance today. But this one's really introducing some much colder air. And behind this cold front, we're going to see things turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Initially, though, that'll just be a band of rain with some hill snow mixed in. The wind's picking up. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place through today across southeast Scotland and northeast England, with those gusts likely to reach 40, 50 or 60 miles an hour. After recent storms, that could cause some issues. Quite a wet day then for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland. For England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers, but generally it's dry and still pretty mild here, 10, 11 degrees Celsius. But the colder air is pushing in behind this rain band, and we have a Met Office warning in place for the combination of snow and wind across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The snow showers really getting going overnight. We could easily see covering several centimetres, even at low levels, and quite a bit more than that over the hills. It'll be rain that pushes south across England and Wales, but the showers following on across northern England, likely to have a wintry mix in here too. And the warning is still in place for much of Thursday as the winds start to whip up once more, blowing the snow around. So a combination of snow and wind blizzards makes for some pretty grim travelling conditions during tomorrow across western Scotland, even central and eastern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it'll start wet across the southeast. It then turns brighter with sunny spells, just a sprinkling of showers, snow on the hills across northern England for sure. But it will be blustery once more, and that's going to make it feel cold through tomorrow. Temperatures only 6 or 7 for many of us. Add on that wind, it will feel much colder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
We are live right across the UK on your TV, on your radio and online. So wherever you are, you can take us out and about with you today.
Here's what's coming up. Ukraine's foreign minister has warned that no sanctions will be enough until Russia leaves Ukraine after Putin sent tanks into the eastern part of the country. The UK, the US, the EU, Canada and Australia have all announced new sanctions.
Well, it comes as the Ukrainian military say a soldier has been killed and 6 wounded by pro-Russian separatists in the last 24 hours.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson will face the Commons later today at PMQs, where the Ukraine crisis and the end of coronavirus restrictions tomorrow are sure to dominate the debate.
Plus, could a blood test save your life after a heart attack? We've got an appointment with Dr. Amaka at about 20 past.
And don't forget, you can join in all of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So our main news this morning, and the UK, the US, the EU, Canada and Australia, amongst others, have announced new sanctions against Russia after it sent tanks into the eastern regions of Ukraine. President Biden called it the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this report.
Heading for the border of eastern Ukraine, Russian tanks and other military vehicles in a move that Western leaders have long warned of. Moscow says this operation is not an invasion, but a stabilisation mission aimed at protecting the Russian-backed separatists in the regions around the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk. Western condemnation has now been followed by a package of sanctions, and a move by Germany to suspend operations to bring Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline into service. In Brussels, NATO's Secretary-General said it wasn't too late for Moscow to pull back from the brink.
I welcome the economic sanctions announced today by many NATO allies and the decision by the German government that it cannot certify the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We urge Russia in the strongest possible terms to choose the path of diplomacy.
In the Ukrainian army trenches overlooking this disputed territory, the situation is extremely tense, with claims rebel groups have stepped up their shelling to instigate a response.
The enemy has been using its heavy weaponry against us. They are always ready to provoke us, blame us for their actions, so that we answer by shooting at them.
In recent days, several Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. This funeral in Kiev for an intelligence officer who died in shelling at the border over the weekend. In Donetsk, scenes of celebration here in this rebel-held city. There is widespread support for the prospect of Russian troops on these streets, but there are also some who are uneasy.
It is such a bleak environment at the moment. I don't know how good the decision is and if it will lead to peace. Now everyone is very worried. Everyone is being taken away from their fathers, brothers, husbands. In fact, everyone is very scared.
It is very important for all of us that peace will finally come to Donetsk and to Luhansk. We just want peace and calm. For us, it is very important. We want to live as one big family together with Russia.
With the Russian parliament having formally ratified Vladimir Putin's request to use troops in eastern Ukraine, the scene is now set for what the West believes is an inevitable incursion into Ukrainian territory. How far these troops advance is the big unknown. Mark White, GB News.
Well, Boris Johnson will be pressured to answer some very difficult questions at Prime Minister's Question Time today in the Commons. To tell us what we can expect today from that, our political correspondent Tom Harwood joins us in the studio. And look, lots of complaints that this first tranche, or barrage, if you like, of sanctions don't go far enough. I heard RUSI, the Royal Institute, what am I trying to say? The Royal United Services Institute, the leading defence think tank, have said it was like taking a pea shooter to a gun attack.
It's certainly the case that the rhetoric seemed to be building up to something larger than this first iteration of sanctions. And of course, we'd been hearing from the Prime Minister for quite some time, for weeks now, that a single Russian soldier toe cap stepping further into Ukraine would be the trigger for this barrage of sanctions. Yet now what we're seeing is an iterative process where we start small with the potential to build up larger. And this seems to be incredibly coordinated between London, Brussels and Washington to make sure that that the West sort of moves in lockstep and presents a united front here. And it becomes a bit difficult, really, for the United Kingdom in this situation because there's a lot of domestic pressure to go harder, to go faster and to go further. We saw Sir Keir Starmer yesterday, for example, calling for Russia Today, the television channel, to have their licence to broadcast revoked, calling for further sanctions on Russian oligarchs, calling for much more action in many different spheres. But there seems to have been agreement with the Americans, the Europeans and the Brits to move at a similar pace and to have a set of sanctions that almost chime with one another. While the UK goes in on 5 banks, the EU has gone on in fewer banks, but more on gas. And the way that these sort of sanctions mesh together presents a very united front from the West. And that's what needs to be projected, according to Western sources, over the course of these early weeks.
Well, language is so important at these times especially, and it's worth pointing out, isn't it, that they're not saying really that there has been an invasion, they say it's the beginning of an invasion, and that's an important distinction, isn't it?
Well, it's really interesting to look at what different countries have been saying on this. The Europeans have been pretty quiet. The Americans have said it's the beginning of an invasion. And the UK was first out of the blocks yesterday to say this is an invasion. They called it a re-invasion, of course, because we know that Russia started to invade Ukraine in 2014. But it's not a full-scale invasion in the language of the United Kingdom. And this is where the distinction is brought. Yes, more Russian troops have gone into those regions that were already held by separatists, Russian-backed separatists, arguably plain-clothed Russian servicemen as well for some years. And that is clearly an incursion on what the UK sees as Ukrainian sovereign territory. But the distinction is that there's a difference between the territory that is currently controlled by rebel forces that is still seen as Ukrainian versus territory that is not controlled by rebel forces that we see as Ukrainian. That's the difference between a full-scale invasion and the incursion invasion we've seen now.
If this continues, if Putin carries along on this path, what else is in our arsenal?
Well, we have, in terms of the ratchet of sanctions, the goal of the West is to cut Russia out of the global financial system, to make sure that they can't finance a war. And that's something that the City of London can do pretty effectively. There are many more banks that we could go after. Technology exports, particularly when it comes to the United Kingdom and the United States of America, are high up on that list too, in terms of going after more individuals. And of course, after Boris Johnson's statement yesterday, we heard it wasn't just those 3 individuals that Boris mentioned in the House of Commons, but also hundreds of members of the Russian State Duma who voted for the recognition of these breakaway Russian-backed regions in eastern Ukraine. So more to do with individuals, more to do with finance, and more to do with technology export. These are all coming down the line. And also we heard a hint yesterday from the Culture Secretary that potentially all of these football tournaments that Russia is very keen to host, allowing British football teams, renowned around the world, to compete in Russia may well be seen as an endorsement of what Russia is doing on the world stage. So potentially cultural power there, as well as the economic.
Yeah, the Champions League final due to take place, isn't it, in May in St Petersburg, and we were talking to Paul Coyte about how that could be arguably played at Wembley instead. And I just wonder how likely do you think, and there's lots of talk about this system SWIFT, which is the international sort of, I suppose you could call it WhatsApp or messaging service that bankers use globally. It's sort of seen as the nuclear option if Russia was to be frozen out of it. And I presume that's being kept very much in our back pocket because, like all of these measures, they have an impact on us. They can hurt us as well.
Certainly, but there's something more here, which is what do diplomats think is the most likely way to deter further incursion into Ukraine? If the whole sanctions package was released in one go, one argument is, well, the Russians have already taken the hit. There's going to be no further hit if they push on through to Kiev. What more could we then deliver upon them? Whereas holding something back may well be that sort of sword of Damocles over the neck of Vladimir Putin to say, actually, you're going to be hurt if you go further, rather than, oh, I've already been hurt, in for a penny, in for a pound, or should I say, a ruble. But this is the argument from the Foreign Office. Of course, there are many who say, actually, Putin is a strong man. He'll only respond to strength. You've got to hit him fast and hit him hard, otherwise he'll think that the West isn't up to it. So those are the two different arguments, and the former seems to be winning out across Washington, London and Brussels at the moment.
Well, here's a basic one for you, but it's actually a very good point, because Ukraine isn't in NATO. You know, we're not legally obliged to protect it. Chris has been in touch. Morning to you, Chris, who says, why are we getting involved?
Well, there's a sense that the international order here is being disturbed, that a strong man is being emboldened, and that the entire sort of post-war settlement that was established after the Second World War of a rules-based international order is being overturned by a country which ultimately is not that significant when it comes to GDP. It's far smaller than the United Kingdom in terms of the size of the Russian economy, about the same size as Spain. And yet they've been able to sort of bully boy their way around Eastern Europe and promote an old-fashioned 20th century view of spheres of influence. And this is something that the international community wants to dissuade, wants to move away from. And by allowing Russia to promote that idea of spheres of influence, it's harking back to an old imperialism that seems to be, in the eyes of most stable members of the international community, one of the past.
Yeah. Look, amidst all of this, which obviously is going to play big in PMQs today, but also you've got to hope cost of living crisis, because this may well impact on the cost of living crisis. But this is a very real situation for a lot of people absolutely right now, and it's going to get worse.
Absolutely. And if the Labour Party is going to be clever about this, they'll relate the international to the personal. They'll talk about how Europe, about 40% of Europe's gas comes from Russia. If there is a larger conflict and that gets turned off, of course, that has implications for Britain as well, even though only about 3% of our gas comes from Russia. They'll talk about how Ukraine is a big grain exporter. What does that mean for the price of bread, the price of beer, the feed for livestock in the United Kingdom? All of this has knock-on consequences. Fuel inflation is already high. It could well get higher. So a smart opposition here would relate that international conflict and the need to avoid conflict internationally, potentially with stronger sanctions that might bite us slightly but avoid the full-scale war that would hurt us even more. So relating that international play to the very personal, the pound in our pockets, will be an incredibly important and potentially a wise path of questioning for the Leader of the Opposition.
And just lastly, Tom, PMQs, can the Prime Minister expect some questions about Partygate? Again, it's back on the front pages of the Times this morning.
It certainly is. Of course, we have now, ITV has been leaked the questionnaire that Boris Johnson was sent last week, that his lawyers returned. We know the questions of that questionnaire, but also, for the first time, we have confirmation that this questionnaire was sent under police caution, which means even though Boris Johnson wasn't spoken to by the police, he answered this questionnaire under police caution, meaning he's the first Prime Minister in the history of the United Kingdom to have been, in effect, even though it's in writing, questioned under caution. Potentially that'll be brought up. I don't think it's likely that the Leader of the Opposition will bring this up, because there's a sense that if this story drags on, people lose interest. Potentially he'll want to wait for the conclusion of that investigation before bringing this up. But potentially this will be a route that some backbenchers may well want to raise at noon today.
Tom, very thorough overview. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's bring you up to date with the headlines then today. There's still no sign of normal weather just yet for the UK. It's bracing for strong winds and heavy snow amid more flood warnings. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for wind across North East England, Cumbria and North Yorkshire. The second warning for wind and snow has been issued for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland for later on today.
Almost half of young people say the pandemic's left them feeling burnt out and experiencing feelings of self-loathing. The Prince's Trust surveyed 16 to 25-year-olds, discovering what they call an alarming downward spiral of anxiety, stress and lack of confidence for the future.
Around 1 million operations a year are cancelled or delayed because of a shortage of nearly 1,500 NHS anaesthetists. The Royal College of Anaesthetists says that could rise to 8 million operations by 2040, with the staff shortfall set to reach 11,000 if action is not urgently taken.
More than 8 in 10 Scots are worried about the soaring cost of energy on household budgets. A YouGov poll shows that consumers in Scotland are concerned about the huge rise in prices set for April.
Heathrow Airport has recorded their lowest annual passenger numbers for nearly 50 years. Britain's biggest airport says numbers fell to under 20 million last year. That's the lowest since 1972.
A new task force has been set up to explore disparities in maternity care. It will examine the reasons why women and their babies from ethnic minority communities and those from poorer neighbourhoods often have worse outcomes.
Is it wrong when we talk about that anaesthetist story?
Yeah.
And it's so important.
Yeah.
That I just sort of think, have you had a general anaesthetic? Propofol is what they give you nowadays. It's a lovely feeling. I think it's so lovely. That whole thing where they say, oh, count down backwards and all that, and you're just like, oh, the next thing you know, it's 4 hours
Well,
later.
the last time I had an anaesthetic was when I was having a C-section.
Oh.
So that was quite weird. They kept saying, can you feel this? And I was like, I really hope not. I really hope I can't feel a thing. So much trust. It's such an important job.
It's such
a really important issue, that. Look, we were talking a little bit earlier on this morning about, COVID restrictions being lifted, people going back into the office. And it's reminding a lot of people who've been spending a lot of time working from home about some of the niggles of being up close and personal with their co-workers. Can't imagine that.
This close.
I can't imagine ever having any niggles about your co-worker, Stephen.
Can't you? I can.
He's been complaining about my hairspray this morning.
Hairspray,
Suffocated.
the coffee breath, all that.
Oh, my goodness me.
No, to be fair, you said you had coffee breath.
I did, I just drink lots of coffee.
I haven't smelt it.
Lots of people say that they can't bear the cold. Lots of women in particular find that newsrooms, offices in general, speaking from experience here, are often too cold for the ladies, too hot for the chaps. In fact, there's been research into that being a fact. But other things like the toilets being a real bugbear, haven't there?
Yeah, toilets not working, people not washing their hands and all that sort of thing. You should wash your hands.
Gossiping in the newsroom, not washing up their cups and plates.
In the newsroom again.
Gosh, in the office.
You see, this is, ladies and gents, this is what she does in the newsroom. Gossip. Gossip, it's non-stop, you would not believe.
Whenever he accuses me of something, you can just generally relate that to Stephen. It's the other way around. I'm studiously there and you're laughing.
She does work very hard when she comes in the morning.
I
just sort of get myself a cup of tea and have a natter. And look through everything, of course, but also have a natter. I like to see our little team back there and see how they're getting on. We've got a nice bunch. So
let us know, what are your back-to-work niggles? Do you wish you were still at home, working from home in the peace and quiet of your spare room?
I tell you what, though, I did 6 months from home.
Yes, because you were shielding, weren't you?
I was shielding.
We had to co-present a show from different locations. You were at home, I was in the studio. It was quite fun.
It was sort of fun, and it was fun for a while, but after 6 months, I was fed up.
Yeah, well, you talked about how, after we have a show here, we come off air, we have a bit of a debrief, there's sort of, all the adrenaline's rumping, we have a chit-chat. At home, the camera would go off and you'd be like, in your living room, I'm done.
Sat there with this on the top and a pair of boxer shorts on under the table, and
Nonsense.
That was it. That's true.
TMI.
True.
TMI.
Talking about sitting down, by the way, this is not working. I've got to tell you.
I really don't like sitting this way round.
It's not working. Well,
I've had a few emails and
tweets.
What?
Frankly, I don't care. As long as I've got a seat, I don't care. But it's not working for you.
Oh, right, they don't like it.
Yes. We've had people protesting this seating arrangement. Rachel, Michael and Carol have all emailed in, amongst others. So I'll tell you what we'll do. Make an executive decision. We'll go back the other way around tomorrow.
There you go. It's funny, isn't it, how people get used to things a certain way and they don't like change. That's fine by us.
I don't know why it matters.
We'll respond. Your wish is our command. Anyway, we're going to take a break. Coming up after that, Dr. Emeka will be in the studio. He'll be looking at some of the latest health headlines. But first of all, here's your forecast.
Good morning. The winds will again be picking up today and potentially causing some problems. We have more Met Office warnings in place. Wet weather for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mostly dry day for England and Wales. Now, this time yesterday we had a weather front slipping south, and we've got almost a repeat performance today. But this one's really introducing some much colder air, and behind this cold front, we're going to see things turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Initially, though, that'll just be a band of rain with some hill snow mixed in. The wind's picking up. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place through today across southeast Scotland and northeast England, with those gusts likely to reach 40, 50 or 60 miles an hour. After recent storms, that could cause some issues. Quite a wet day then for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland. For England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers, but generally it's dry and still pretty mild here, 10, 11 degrees Celsius. But the colder air is pushing in behind this rain band, and we have a Met Office warning in place for the combination of snow and wind across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The snow showers really getting going overnight. We could easily see covering several centimetres, even at low levels, and quite a bit more than that over the hills. It'll be rain that pushes south across England and Wales, but the showers following on across northern England, likely to have a wintry mix in here too. And the warning is still in place for much of Thursday as the winds start to whip up once more, blowing the snow around. So a combination of snow and wind blizzards makes for some pretty grim travelling conditions during tomorrow across western Scotland, even central and eastern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it'll start wet across the southeast. It then turns brighter with sunny spells, just a sprinkling of showers, snow on the hills across northern England for sure. But it will be blustery once more, and that's going to make it feel cold through tomorrow. Temperatures only 6 or 7 for many of us. Add on that wind, it will feel much colder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Time now for telemedicine, and with us this morning, as always, Dr. Ameka. Good to see you.
Hi.
We're having too much fun in the break, aren't we?
I know we are.
All the gossip.
It's got to stop. But there's some interesting news about this, a blood test that could help us, either before or after a heart attack.
Yeah, so it's CRP, C-reactive protein, and it's an acute phase protein, something that we see and use a lot in A&E, testing for like inflammation and infection, and it's raised generally if you've had a heart attack. The main component we test for is something called troponin, which is released by the heart muscle once you've had any kind of damage to the heart muscle. And the thing is, this level raises after a while. So if anyone's suspected of a heart attack or any heart problems, when we bring them to A&E, we take the test, and then we have to wait for a couple hours, at least 4 hours after they present and say they've had this kind of heart trouble or pain, and we test again to see a raise in this. However, with a number of people in the population, they can have silent heart attacks, which what I think your mother may have had. Yeah, and this is quite common with elderly people, women and diabetics, where you might actually not have the crushing chest pain and the palpitations and the sweating and difficulty breathing, and you may not actually know you've had a heart attack. But using this CRP, we can test the blood and see exactly what you've had.
Yeah, see, look, this is an issue close to my heart, forgive the pun, because my mum had a series of heart attacks last year. Actually, it was her anniversary yesterday, a year since her first major heart attack, and she had exactly that. She didn't have the classic sort of collapse to the floor, clutching her chest like you see in the movies. She had dizziness combined with heartburn, and she thought she had indigestion, to be honest, but she kept trying to... Oh, there's my mum, bless her, on the... She'll be so embarrassed.
She's going to love this.
So she went into A&E and had to wait for those troponin levels to come back. So is this blood test then going to be quicker so that traumatic wait really...
It's not generally going to be quicker. We do it at the same time as troponin. However, CRP is a test where and the thing is, CRP, like troponin, takes a while to raise. Usually CRP will be highest even days after the actual event. However, people with a generally raised CRP in general, normally under 2 is the general level. Your CRP shouldn't be raised. But if it's like 10 to 15 on a general level, this could sense the fact that you have some information and could predict an acute cardiac event such as myocardial infarction, aka a heart attack.
Why are diabetics more prone to having silent heart attacks?
I'm not exactly sure. So with diabetics, there's a lot of organ failure that happens with diabetes, and a lot happens with the arteries. The coronary arteries, the arteries that supply the heart, those are the ones that get blocked, which cause the heart attack. Obviously, having diabetes or being obese or having ischemic heart disease or coronary heart disease, this raises the risk of potentially having a heart attack. Silent heart attacks, obviously the ones that don't present the typical symptoms, we're not exactly sure why diabetics have these or women or elderly people, however it happens. And that's why I do urge people when they have a funny turn and whatnot, or you've had a grandparent who's had an event, this could be a heart attack, and that's why we always check. For people who've come in A&E, we don't exactly know why.
And you are an A&E doctor. I mean, this is what you see day in, day out. And it makes me feel so grateful to doctors like you saving my mum's life. But, there are people then, through this, another news story out today, there's this blood test that can show that you're at risk of a fatal heart attack within the next 3 years, and that would stop you seeing so many patients.
Yeah, that is the CRP, but I think there are a number of different factors that go into it. A number of different factors that go into your risk. Obviously, I mentioned your risk for cardiovascular disease is based on age, it's based on your weight, based on your family history, any hereditary conditions. However, it's like one of these things that's very, very difficult to predict, but we do have people in high-risk groups, and those are the people who are seen in the community by the GPs and started sometimes on medication. So if you have high blood pressure, if you have high cholesterol, if you have diabetes, these are people who we're going to put on medication prophylactically to prevent a cardiac event such as heart attack.
Yeah.
Clever stuff.
Is your mum watching now, do you think?
Yeah,
Will
she is,
be?
yeah.
Mrs. Webster, I have to say to you that you should have done, and I'm glad you're better, but you should have done more housework. You should have gotten this. You should have done more washing up, more hoovering and more cooking.
She'll laugh because she hates housework.
I know. So I read that the study showing that, a moderate amount of housework can obviously reduce your cardiovascular risk.
It's just good exercise, right?
It's generally good exercise. And the thing is, this study, I looked at it, and it was only done with women. So it is...
That's very sexist.
Which, by the way, for the record, housework does not exclusively need to be done by women.
I do a lot of housework myself.
Good man, good man.
I do a lot of housework myself. However, it's just basically saying a little bit of moderate kind of movement and cardiovascular exercise is going to be beneficial in the long term. That's basically all it's saying.
Okay.
As in, the headline, is catchy, cooking and cleaning. But it's generally just movement.
No, I think it gives me a good workout.
Yeah, I mean, 4 hours of daily life movement, which is a nice way of looking at it.
Exactly, daily life movement.
Just getting up and about and doing a few
bits. Getting up and down the stairs, getting up and about, gardening,
to and from the fridge.
Walking the dog, whichever.
Yeah, allowed to from the fridge.
You don't need to go ahead and cook and clean.
For your cool water or whatever healthy drink it might be. Right, sticking with the heart theme, there's been some new research, this is in The Sun in Scotland today, that shows what happens to the heart just before we die. There was a man who was having a heart attack to the brain, sorry. He was having a heart attack and they inadvertently measured what happens to the brain.
Yeah, so obviously we know that the brain goes through a number of different, what we call waves. And then there are a number of different waves, and we've studied the brain in terms of what happens to the brain when you sleep, when you're awake, when you're excited, when you're in love, through a number of different things. And here, obviously, they've said that there are a number of different things that happen just before you die, potentially picturing that you could have an event where you almost have a flash of your whole life 30 seconds before your heart stops.
You see, now that is interesting, is it? Because it's been the sort of the old wives' tale or whatever that, you know,
life flashes before your eyes.
Flashes before your eyes. Well, it's true.
It's a very difficult thing to study because obviously you're going to have to look at people right before they die. You can never really predict exactly when somebody's heart will stop and they'll die. Plus, as an A&E doctor, most of the time when your heart stops, we try and start it again. In the event that you have a DNA CPR and you're possibly suffering from a chronic illness and we know that your time is coming and we know that your heart will stop, etc., and we won't try and bring you back, then you may look at these people, and if they put themselves forward, we can look at their brains and what they actually see. But the thing is, nobody's going to come back and tell you, so you're never going to really know.
Although,
this is just an isolated event.
Lots of people who've had near-death experiences have reported that, haven't they? Which is obviously not being measured. People who've been in car crashes, sort of watching themselves from a sort of...
But it's hard to say what people actually imagine exactly what happens. People say they've been to heaven and hell and experienced loads of stuff after death and been brought back. It's kind of hard to say what the body and the brain will experience. What we do know is the brain is a very, very complex structure, the most complex organ we have. We do know it goes through a number of changes while we're sleeping, while we're dreaming, during different phases and stages of sleep and dreaming, and while we experience different emotions. So it wouldn't surprise me that just before when we pass, the brain would go through some emotions where we'd actually...
But it's interesting, if you sort of view it like a computer, it does almost seem to have a specific shutdown sequence then.
Mechanism, like a Microsoft.
But also there's all the questions, I mean, we're getting deep now, but sort of spirituality questions. I mean, when I think about an A&E hospital where you are seeing more people on the brink of life than probably anywhere else. And it's sort of all these people who report these out-of-body experiences and lots of people who go on to somewhere else or maybe not.
It's very difficult because obviously a lot of people in the viewers won't have seen people just before they've died. I've seen a number of people just before they pass, unfortunately. And a lot of the time they're to the point where they can barely say anything to you, but you can see, and any doctor will tell you, you can see and you know kind of when it's coming. And you know when people are going to take
goosebumps.
you know when people are going to take their last breaths, and especially because they have a certain breathing pattern.
The death
regular
rattle.
breathing pattern, the death rattle. And you can almost see it, and there's nothing you can really do to like mimic that kind of picture because you can almost see when someone looks at you and you're the last person they're going to see.
Dr. Mecca.
No, it's fascinating.
Is it quite peaceful?
Though.
Tell us it's a peaceful moment in most instances. I mean, obviously you see trauma.
Obviously, in the emergency department, we don't want people to pass away. Like, we're not a hospital, a long-term ward. We don't want people to pass away. However, there's certain things, especially when, an elderly person's come in and they've had something like a AAA, an aortic aneurysm rupture. We know pretty much there's nothing we can do in a lot of those circumstances. We've spoken to them. The first thing we do is we let them know, we call the families, get everyone in, because we know pretty much it's a ticking time bomb, especially if we can't repair it. And when you see them and they look at you, it's almost like you just want to make sure they're in as much comfort as possible. At that point, your aim as a doctor isn't to revive them, it's not to save them, it's more a comfort treatment.
It's that's a dignified end of life.
A dignified end of life. And I think that's probably when they go through these phases, because you're going to be in a situation where, imagine, you're thinking, this is it. So what are you going to do? You're going to remember everything from beginning to end.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. But you see, for one, I'm not frightened of death. I think a lot of people...
Neither am I, funny enough.
Yeah,
I think maybe because I've become so accustomed to it. And as a doctor, one of the things we learn in medical school is we pronounce people dead, and you learn how to pronounce people dead and how to know when someone is actually dead. Some doctors have made the mistake of pronouncing people dead who aren't.
Gosh!
Let's not go there.
And so because of that, we're very, very aware of the signs to look out for signs of life. And I think because I've seen it, I've seen people live, I've seen people die, I'm kind of not afraid of it. It's almost like a natural, natural end, isn't it?
It is.
That everyone will eventually come to at their own time. And so it's this study, this is one I want to really, really look at because I think that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, what an interesting segment, a little heart and a same sort of death segment as well. But
unfortunately, our producers just said to us, I think this is a good place to end. I mean,
we shouldn't laugh. Dr. Emeka, I'm in awe of what you do. Thank you for coming in and talking to us about it all. Dr. Emeka Okorocha.
Well, coming up, we're going to take you through the papers in just a couple of minutes with Oscar Reddrop and Kate Hardcastle.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 8:37. It's time now to go through your newspapers. Let's take a look at the front pages as they're shaping up today. Here's the Daily Mail reporting the US President Joe Biden has said the world is on the brink of war as Russia prepares for a full-scale assault on the Ukraine.
The Independent says the PM has been urged to strengthen tepid Russian sanctions as they're likely, it's claimed, to have little impact.
Following up on that, the Mirror reports MPs and activists have called for a clampdown on London being used to launder Russian money.
The Metro says we'll grab him by the rubles and leave the Russian Federation a pariah state.
OK, well, let's go inside the papers now. Joining us now to go through them, the business expert Kate Hardcastle and crisis communication and public affairs consultant Oscar Redrup. Welcome back, both of you. Thanks for staying here with us. Kate, shall we start with you? We sort of decided we'll sort of park the Ukraine situation for now, because we talked a lot about it already this hour. Let's talk about Peloton bikes at the front page of the FT this morning.
One crisis to another for Peloton.
Well, this is true. I mean, they really were this kind of piece of equipment that was the must-have. They were on everyone's Instagram. Everyone was talking about it. It's this cycle that connects you to other cyclists. Obviously, it's an exercise bike. And that was the point of difference, really, that you could exercise en masse. And I think a lot of people who were missing the gym memberships really enjoyed it. Their sales surged. Everything was going well. And then, as you said, it's been one PR disaster after another, including the fact that, I don't watch it, but Sex and the City, a major character, had a heart attack on there.
Yeah, Mr. Big.
Yeah. Right, OK. So this is about the fact that they have had an internal project called Project Tin Man, which has been trying to quickly repair rust that was starting to show on models and still ship them out to customers. Now, it's a really interesting piece on the Financial Times when you start to look at the effect of how brand reputation is so important to any organisation. You can be the sweetheart of the moment, but if consumer confidence and that kind of authentic way of doing business starts to wane, it really can start to eat in, because those consumers then start looking for more to unravel. And I think it's just a lesson learned to everyone that it doesn't matter how well you're doing, you have to be really careful and to ensure that authenticity in all you do. If you go out and say these are premium pieces of equipment, they need not be rusting. And if they do, you've got to do something about it.
But you know what? It's not entirely their fault, is it? I mean, obviously the Sex and the City incident wasn't their fault. But it did have. But then they did a very clever recovery ad, which I think Ryan Reynolds or Hugh Jackman or someone was behind, that had the actor involved in, who's then since been sort of accused of inappropriate behaviour. And so it's just, Do you think it's the end for them?
No, but I think it's that flying high ideal. I mean, what happens with anyone who takes a lead in the marketplaces is the competition starts heating up too, and I think that's also affected it. They're also having to look at things like price rises on the membership. That starts to affect it. So, of course, this is much bigger than just the communications piece. But we've got Oscar, a comms expert there on the end, who I'm sure will agree how important it is to get it right.
Did you buy a Peloton?
Well, no, just really, I think the thing they forget kind of reputational stuff, and I just don't really understand the need anymore. I mean, we were talking about front pages. I actually battled to try and find a story or a front page that actually declared that, you know, we are now officially COVID. We have, you know, for now, and I know anything can come around the corner, but we have put an end to COVID in this country after 2 years of just complete misery. And
well, it's still there. It's still going around.
No, of course,
including Her Majesty the Queen.
No, of course. But the idea of kind of locking yourself up in your bedroom on a bike, I don't understand that anymore. I think why would you not take a bike ride outside or go to a gym? And so I think Peloton will have slightly longer term issues in terms of like the reputational stuff. Transparency is absolutely key. If you feel like there is something reputationally going to be damaging to your company or brand, get ahead of the newspapers. Don't let drip feeds of, you know, and kind of observation or, you know, hiding stuff. Be transparent, get ahead of it, and just be open and honest with these things.
Yeah, interesting that. Don't have tactics or spin.
Exactly.
In effect. Oscar, we'll have a little look at the Ukraine situation in The Independent this morning. There's been concern voiced that the sanctions, certainly that the PM has talked about, if we take them sort of out of context of what everybody else is doing, just aren't strong enough.
I only wanted to bring this up really, really briefly. One, because I believe you are interviewing Liz Truss at 9. Or just after 9 today, and also just since we actually spoke, you know, the government are cooking up those stronger Russian sanctions, including so there's going to be more banks, more lists of oligarchs, and I think this is a really crucial bit, and this is quite mega. You know, export controls, which will be hugely damaging to Russia. But again, and this is what I really would love you guys to kind of challenge the Foreign Secretary on, is there's been some mixed messages from her this morning because. You know, she's talking about the government, you know, standing a little bit firmer, cooking up these tougher these tougher sanctions, but at the same time she's saying that there's nothing stopping him. Well, she doesn't believe that he can be stopped. You know, 99% of the way there now, and these sanctions will be immaterial. And I find that an odd. And then we get into the territory we're talking about. You know, what military support we're going to be offering the Ukraine, and then we are in a whole different, I think. In a different conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose even if he can't be stopped, you still got to try. That's diplomacy for you.
We truly understand as well the impact this has globally on economies, on food supply, oil supply. I mean, this is so significant to us all, and really is something that we need to understand how those measures are going to be put in place to at least try and keep trying to change the narrative.
But if he succeeds, though, if he succeeds in what he wants to do, then that's almost presents a sort of, it simplifies it, but an open goal for China to do what it wants. And, you know, and we end up looking at China as a huge superpower.
I think it's that idea that I think there's been some commentators talking about Putin wants to go full circle in terms of what he set out to achieve, and there's very much that kind of career cyclical element from it. But this is lives, this is livelihoods, this is world economics as well as the rights of people, and we just need to make sure that we as a nation are standing up to do the right thing.
Let's talk about chess, shall we? This is a story inside the Times, page 32. 16-year-old chess prodigy has been winning at a... well, tell us the story.
Well,
I could read the whole thing and then you'd have nothing left.
That's also a bit of a surprise for me, but absolutely. I think it was just to point out that chess in my day was not a game to be proud of playing. I was absolutely avid chess player. I loved it, yeah, and no good at it. My kids have really taken up on that, and I'm really pleased to see that it's still something that they're doing within schools. But this 16-year-old just came in and has absolutely brilliantly come in to beat the 31-year-old, so the previous grandmaster, and I've lost all of the details of the story.
Carlsen.
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Magnus Carlsen
is
number one.
He was the 31-year-old number one, yes.
But this 16-year-old is Ramesh Babu Pragnanandaha.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Yes,
My
absolutely.
pleasure.
I'm sorry I didn't have the details on that.
Did you
Because I
see the
was going to
Queen's
talk to
Gambit?
you about
Oh, go on.
rental in the Times, which I think,
Yes.
fashion rental, which I think is such an important one. We've just had London Fashion Week finish yesterday. Huge, important part of the business side of what we do here in the UK. Renowned for it worldwide. We really are on the world stage. Obviously, the storms had a massive effect in terms of that. And a lot of the catwalks were digital anyway after what's happened with COVID. But I think it's just great to see that, again, something that was perhaps not seen as de rigueur or part of what you could do within fashion has now become a very sensible option, and that's the idea of rental. You know, if you want to go to an event, if you want to have that luxury handbag, if you needed to, Stephen, then that was something that you could do on a rental basis. And I think it's
How does that work? How does that work from a business perspective? Because obviously they're not making as many or selling as many bags. So doesn't their income go down as a result?
Well, it's supply and demand. If you get more renters than you do buyers, then potentially it could equate or actually be more. There's an environmental ethical element to it, absolutely. We've got to do the right thing, and fashion does cost a lot to purchase, particularly in terms of the environment too. Fast fashion more so. But I think with luxury fashion, what do? Do you hide away and accept that it's just something you don't want to take part in, or do you actually own it? Do you take part of it and say, right, OK, what can we do? How can we do limited edition ranges that might cost more to rent, etc.? There are ways and means. What I'm pleased to see, though, is it's just a conversation to have now. I always used to buy my clothes from charity shops. I just couldn't afford them on the salary I was earning. And it was just very much an embarrassment, shouldn't talk about it. I think it's great that we can celebrate the cyclical fashion economy.
Can I ask a question about handbags, very briefly? My mum always said to me when she brought me up, she was like, never... Like, you know, so if a woman asks you to pass her bag, she's like, never look in a woman's handbag.
Oh, yeah, it's very private.
Yeah, and that was
Can't
always...
tell you. It's like asking a woman their age.
Yeah.
No, it's very personal.
No, it's interesting.
And yet I feel we've crossed those boundaries this morning.
Yeah, I think
won't do the second one, don't worry.
Stephen's had a good rummage through my handbag, metaphorically speaking.
I have rummaged through ladies' handbags before.
Right. Yeah, that's supposed to...
And what did you find, Stephen?
Well, our friend Gillian.
Yeah.
And I've had a rummage
She had
through
many
her.
a handbag.
I don't know where this is going. I've had a rummage through her handbag. And I have to say, she was not very happy.
No, not that.
I just thought it was like, just see what she's got in here.
Yeah.
Can I talk to you about holidays before we go?
Oh, go on then. Bring us back to the sensible chat. This is
someone
in
has
the
to.
eye. Yeah,
Maybe, you know, the people in the ear thing can just give me a bit of praise there. That'd be great. But I'm going to talk to you about the eye because...
Saying, get her off.
Are they?
No,
they're not. Of course they're not, Kate.
What happens on holiday? Because I am so out of sync with this survey, and I just want to clarify something. This is the percentage of people who have gone into this survey to understand what you do as a habit on holiday. So dining out every day, 47% of people on holiday dine out every day. That makes sense to me.
You do that all year round, so...
Right. So, wearing swimwear instead of underwear. Is that something you do on holiday?
Better that way round, I would, I would urge.
That's
Well, I suppose
26
if you were-
of
You're at the
them.
pool all day.
Can't boxes in the pool, just, you know, it's not a good look.
A quarter of us steal toiletries from the hotel.
No,
Yeah.
it's awful. My husband does that and I'm mortified.
Oh, you've just outed him, Isabel.
Yeah, stop it.
Daytime nap, Stephen.
Oh, no, but, you
do that anyway.
I do it.
Siesta.
I've been doing it. I've been working earlies for
Decades.
At least a decade. So I mean, at least, I do have a daytime nap. Yeah.
Fair enough.
A quarter of us, well, 24%, yeah. So that's pretty on kilter. But I just, this
isn't
holiday
you, right?
does not sound like me.
Now I need to ask Oscar, what do you do on holiday that you don't necessarily do at home?
Oh God! I'd say I definitely let my hair down a little bit more on holiday. I think that's entirely natural. But I'm sounding like a politician here. I'm completely. It's very diplomatic.
Did you run through a wheat field or something?
No, definitely wasn't a wheat field. No, but no, I think that's the whole point, isn't it? You know, like you leave behind the grey UK where you have to put on a suit and pretend to talk sensibly all day long, and then you can go to some European country and act like a
Brit abroad.
Blankety blank, absolutely.
Do you drink alcohol at the airport before you set off?
Of course, yeah.
Even if
yeah.
it's 5 o'clock
In fact, I
in the morning?
I love that airport kind of pubs are like a real kind of nice little curiosity, I think. It's the, the kind of like English tavern in the middle of like Heathrow. I love it. Yeah, I love it, absolutely.
In my drinking days, even if I was getting a flight at 7 in the morning, I'd still go and have a large scotch or whatever.
Yeah,
it's like you can.
Absolutely.
So I'd do it.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
I never did. To be fair, I never did one of the, the kind of the iron upper.
Lads' holiday.
And I actually never did a lads' holiday, but I kind of regret it now.
Still time, Oscar.
Yeah, there's still time. You've still got time for your 18 to 30, haven't you?
Absolutely.
You'll be right. Look, good to see you both this morning. Kate Hardcastle, Oscar Redrop, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much. OK, on to rugby now. Calls are growing for the Welsh Rugby Union. Are we going to be able to do the story this hour? Good, yeah. They're growing to try and revisit a decision banning young girls from taking part in mixed rugby games in Wales.
Yeah, at the moment, boys and girls can play together until the age of 13, but from September, girls' participation in teams for under-12s and under-13s will be stopped.
Yeah, this takes 2 years of mixed game time away from them. And our Wales reporter, Lily Hewitson, is here with all the details. Lily, this is an exclusive story that you're bringing us this morning. Tell us more.
Yes, that's right, Isabel. Politicians, parents and players alike are all demanding more answers from the Welsh Rugby Union over this decision. They want to know exactly why these young girls have to play for these mixed rugby teams are being cut short from later on this year. Now, these girls have always known that once they'd outgrown their under-13s teams, they'd have to move on to an only girls squad. So before that, they could play, with boys the same age as them. But now that's going to change. However, some are upset that the decision has been made for them prematurely and without their consultation. Now, these girls and their families say this decision hasn't been based on their age, their weight, their size, or even for safety purposes. They're concerned that the decision has been made because of their gender. Now, committees of rugby clubs across Wales were asked about this change in the decision, but the girls themselves who play were not. Now, the member of the Senedd for Bridgend and Porthcawl, Sarah Murphy, is one of many people who are demanding more answers from the union. She's heard the concerns of a number of children in her constituency who play for mixed teams.
Decisions shouldn't be made about a group, whether that's children, whether that's based on gender, whether that's based on any protected characteristic that will impact them without getting their views on that and their feedback on that. I think, obviously, it's particularly sad because they are children and they love rugby. And one of the things that Alicia May's mother, Cheryl, said to me was that Alicia May had felt like a real sense of acceptance from playing mixed rugby. And when I asked both the girls, why do you like playing mixed rugby? They were like, because it's rougher and because it's a higher standard at that age, And so I have to feel, and I have, I've had a meeting with 2 representatives from the WIU, and I did say, you have made this decision, though, based on their gender, not on their ability, not on their age. You have made this purely based on their gender. And that's what's so significant here, when you hear from the girls themselves and how that has made them feel, how that has made them question themselves, and how, I suppose, valued they are to the WIU.
I also had a chat to Jackie. Her daughter Evelyn is the captain of a mixed rugby team, an under-12s rugby team in Bridgend. Now, Evelyn's been told she can no longer play for the team, which she's been a part of since she was 5.
There's just an overwhelming sense of, for her and those girls, that they're powerless in this decision. That I think is really, really horrible. And it's powerlessness that teaches her that the system is sort of stacked against her potentially, and her voice is not worth anything. And I think that is a really dangerous message, and a really contrary message to where we are as a nation, as a society right now. There is certainly a risk to Welsh women's rugby long term. The girls that have played, who have committed, who have done everything right on a rugby pitch and in a rugby team, instead of getting their support, that there's, at 12 and 13, the game of rugby is pretty physical, and they've committed and they've got to the point where they are absolutely valued member of a team. They're not being allowed just because of because there's only a few girls playing. It seems a very strange notion to me, and I don't think it's fair just on the basis of your gender, which is irrelevant in the middle of a rugby match, I can promise. When you can tackle as hard and as relentlessly as Evie and turn over rucks and everything else, your gender's just not a thing. These girls are choosing to be on that pitch and they're giving their all, right? So I have to say that the coaches have been really sad that this decision has been made, that none of them can understand it. It just seems a very strange decision to have made, because the girls hold their own. Now, there might be low numbers, but they are, you don't get to be captain of a 25-strong squad if you're not a value-add player, right?
Now, in a statement, the Welsh Rugby Union told me the decision to lower the maximum age for mixed rugby from 13 to 11 was made following a period of consultation and because of a drop in female participation during the season girls moved to mixed under-12s rugby. Now, they say the age banding is the best model for the WRU, given the addition of opportunities which are now in place for the female game.
OK, Lily, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you for that exclusive. Stay with us here on Breakfast. Coming up, we're going to be talking to the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. First, though, here's the weather.
Good morning. The winds will again be picking up today and potentially causing some problems. We have more Met Office warnings in place. Wet weather for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mostly dry day for England and Wales. Now, this time yesterday we had a weather front slipping south, and we've got almost a repeat performance today. But this one's really introducing some much colder air, and behind this cold front, we're going to see things turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Initially, though, that'll just be a band of rain with some hill snow mixed in. The wind's picking up. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place through today across southeast Scotland and northeast England, with those gusts likely to reach 40, 50 or 60 miles an hour. After recent storms, that could cause some issues. Quite a wet day then for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland. For England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers, but generally it's dry and still pretty mild here, 10, 11 degrees Celsius. But the colder air is pushing in behind this rain band, and we have a Met Office warning in place for the combination of snow and wind across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The snow showers really getting going overnight. We could easily see covering several centimetres, even at low levels, and quite a bit more than that over the hills. It'll be rain that pushes south across England and Wales, but the showers following on across northern England, likely to have a wintry mix in here too. And the warning is still in place for much of Thursday as the winds start to whip up once more, blowing the snow around. So a combination of snow and wind blizzards makes for some pretty grim travelling conditions during tomorrow across western Scotland, even central and eastern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it'll start wet across the southeast. It then turns brighter with sunny spells, just a sprinkling of showers, snow on the hills across northern England for sure. But it will be blustery once more, and that's going to make it feel cold through tomorrow. Temperatures only 6 or 7 for many of us. Add on that wind, it will feel much colder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 23rd of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, your radio and online. So wherever you are this morning, you can take us with you.
Well, here's what's coming up for you this morning. Ukraine's foreign minister has warned that no sanctions will be enough until Russia leaves Ukraine after President Putin sent tanks into the eastern part of the country. The UK, the US, the EU, Canada and Australia have all announced new sanctions.
We'll be asking the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss if the sanctions implemented against Russia go far enough. She'll be joining us in a few moments' time.
Plus, how are storms created and why was there an earthquake in Birmingham? We're putting all the questions that you're too embarrassed to ask to a top astronomer and meteorologist.
And don't forget, you can always join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So our main news today in the UK, the US, the EU, Canada and Australia, amongst others, have announced new sanctions against Russia after it sent tanks into the eastern regions of Ukraine. President Biden called it the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who joins us here in the studio. Look, in a few moments' time, we'll be speaking to the Foreign Secretary. She's written in the papers today saying nothing is off the table. I suppose the big question then to the Foreign Secretary, if that is the case, why haven't they gone in harder first? Because what we've laid out so far has come in for quite a lot of criticism.
It certainly has, and listening to parliamentarians across the House yesterday from all political parties, there seemed to be a bit of a frustration that we hadn't gone in harder. Calling this the first barrage would have implied some pretty substantial measures. But what we got is precise measures, where we could do sort of precise damage and apply precise pain, not to the Russian people in general, but to the Kremlin in particular. These banks, whether they're financing the Russian military or people close to Vladimir Putin, and indeed sanctioning oligarchs that are personally close to Vladimir Putin as well. That is a precise measure that the UK has taken, and crucially taken in concert with the West in general. This is a highly orchestrated, organised approach that the UK isn't doing independently by itself, but has been talking for weeks, even months, with players in Washington and in Brussels to deliver this coordinated effort.
There does seem to be some concern that even at this early stage, they haven't gone after Putin himself.
Yes, I believe what is happening is that there is a pressure point strategy being applied to people around Putin at first. Now, obviously, some crucial points are being held back in order to try and sort of hold this sword of Damocles above the neck of the Kremlin, saying if you go further, there will be a world of pain to come. Now, there are many critics of that approach, saying that we should have gone all in at the start, but that would mean that there's nothing to hold back. And I suppose the argument may be that if everything was applied as soon as that first Russian soldier's boot crossed into eastern Ukraine, then Russia's already been hurt. And there's no more hurt to come, so they might as well push forward, push through to Kiev, push through right across to the west of Ukraine. That seems to be the argument, not just of the Foreign Office in the United Kingdom, but the Western allies in general. This is an approach that appears to have been agreed across the West and across NATO. That being said, there is more to come. Very clearly, we're getting hints of what we may be looking for in the next round of sanctions, in the next tranche of sanctions, as Boris Johnson describes it, for which there is considerable pressure in domestic politics. Now, this would include cutting Russia out of the global financial system as much as the West can, to be unable to finance war, to cut it out of technology exports, as well as further sanctions for individuals and oligarchs. So there is a lot that is being held in our back pocket, although considerable political pressure to use more soon.
And I suppose the path the government has to walk carefully is between national self-defence and national self-interest. And a lot of these measures that will hurt Putin and the Kremlin and those around him will also arguably hurt British business and people who are already struggling with the cost of living squeeze when we see our energy supplies increase or costs increase.
Absolutely. The UK only imports around 3% of our natural gas from Russia. But in Europe, that's around 40%. And of course, if Europe starts to import less from Russia, they'll be importing more from America, more from Qatar, our sources of gas. Greater competition for that means that our prices go up. The whole world is interconnected here, and we have not produced much natural gas ourselves for the last 15 years or so. We've really depleted our domestic production, and we're not energy independent in the way that North America is. So we're really not insulated from this stuff.
OK, well, stay where you are, Tom, and we'll get some analysis from you in just a moment.
Let's talk to the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, who joins us now. Thanks for joining us on GB News this morning, Minister. Look, what do you make of the concerns that have been raised by many people, including some of your own MPs, saying the sanctions announced yesterday are just tepid?
Well, they are serious sanctions. We've targeted oligarchs that are close to Vladimir Putin. We're able to do that because we passed legislation last week on that. We have also targeted key Russian banks, for example, the bank that finances the Russian military. We're clear that Russia won't be able to raise sovereign debt in the UK markets. We're going to target members of the Russian Parliament who voted for the recognition of the so-called republic. So they are tough sanctions, but they are in response to the recognition of those so-called republics. What we haven't yet seen is a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and we're clear, working with our international allies, there will be more coming if there is a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It's an important part of our deterrence strategy to Russia that we retain sanctions in the locker that we are able to use in the event of a full-scale invasion. And that's an approach we've agreed with the Americans, with the Europeans. One absolutely key thing is we cannot allow Putin to divide the West. We cannot allow him to play divide and rule, which is why it's so important that we've agreed this package of sanctions with our allies. And we will also have coordinated sanctions in the event of a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
OK, I just want to clarify then what exactly you are waiting for then to ramp up those sanctions. You say you're waiting for a full-scale invasion. Yesterday, Sajid Javid, doing the media rounds in the morning, said that he saw what was happening in these disputed areas of Ukraine as the beginning of an invasion. An invasion is an invasion, isn't it?
Well, what we haven't yet had is confirmation of those Russian troops in those areas in Ukraine. So we haven't seen a full-scale invasion. The situation is ambiguous, and of course the Russians are constantly putting out disinformation, accusing the Ukrainians of operations, trying to create a false flag, trying to create a pretext. But we don't have the concrete information that invasion has yet taken place.
We do have some details. I know it was released yesterday about what the other options may be. And I know one thing you're holding in your arsenal is this idea of export controls. I mean, that would at least have the potential, wouldn't it, to really degrade the military-industrial base in Russia?
That's absolutely right. We are looking at those types of options. We're looking at further controls on financial markets, and we have a very long list of oligarchs that we will be targeting in the event of a full frontal invasion of Ukraine. We're also looking at other banks, that we can target other companies of interest to the Russian government. And the purpose of this is to inflict pain on Vladimir Putin and the Russian regime. The UK has also been at the forefront of supplying defensive weapons into Ukraine, supporting Ukrainians economically, supporting Ukraine politically, bodies like the UN, and we will continue with that support.
I'm interested in what you've written in the Times today, Secretary of State. You've said that nothing is off the table in responding to Putin's aggression. How far do you think we are prepared to go? Do you see at this stage that it will only be sanctions, or could you foresee a situation where we have to, for example, start talking about increasing defence spend, or perhaps send more boots to the Baltic nations like the Americans announced last night?
Well, we have already increased our level of troops to the Baltic nations. We particularly are supporting Estonia with our enhanced forward presence. We've upped our level of air support in the region. We've upped our level of naval support in the region. And this is a wake-up call for NATO. For years and years, Russia has been building up its military strength. It's been investing in high-tech military capabilities. We, the United Kingdom, have upped our defence spending, but we need to see NATO allies do that as well, because my view is Vladimir Putin will not stop at Ukraine. If he is successful in Ukraine, and we're doing all we can to stop him being successful, he will move on to wider Eastern Europe. He's been publicly explicit about that.
So what do you mean then by nothing is off the table? Yeah, go on. I mean, what do you mean by nothing is off the table if, as you say, he won't respond to sanctions and you think he's been explicit in his ambitions to go further?
Well, on the subject of sanctions, I was being clear that nothing is off the table. That this issue of the economic support we have in Britain, protecting freedom and democracy in Europe is absolutely priceless, and we are prepared to take tough decisions. The Germans have shown they're prepared to take tough decisions with the cancellation of Nord Stream 2. The Americans have shown they're prepared to take tough decisions. What I'm saying is that we should be prepared to take those tough decisions for the long-term sake of freedom and democracy in Europe, and we are united with our allies in doing that. The other point I was making is that we need to do more to strengthen NATO, and we are working on that.
In the immediate term, what do we do to get more Brits out of the region? I mean, I know you've talked about getting on commercial flights. The problem is commercial flights are few and far between now.
Commercial flights are still available, and we are very clear people should leave Ukraine. There is a very high likelihood of a serious conflict in Ukraine. Now, there are some people that we have been in touch with who want to stay put in Ukraine. That is their decision, but we have been very clear with our advice people should get out of Ukraine.
Can I just ask your view on the role of soft power in all of this? Boris Johnson and indeed I think the Culture Secretary suggesting things like the Champions League final, which is due to be hosted in St. Petersburg later in the spring, should be stripped from Russia. The role of Russia in sport, in football in particular, could be quite a powerful tool, couldn't it?
I agree, and I don't think the match should go ahead in St. Petersburg. And part of what will happen if Putin goes ahead with this full-scale invasion of Ukraine is that Russia will become an international pariah. They will not be able to participate as they have been doing in international events. They will not be able to be part of international finance. They will see their companies not able to trade with Western Europe and, in fact, the broader G7. This will have serious consequences for Russia. I believe that Vladimir Putin has made a massive miscalculation. I believe the Ukrainians will fight, and this will be a very, very difficult war for Russia. I also see, from the evidence we have in front of us, that he is hell-bent on doing it, regrettably.
What, so you think that whatever sanctions you've got and all this stuff in your arsenal that you're talking about, that actually he won't be stopped?
I believe that he is highly likely to stage an invasion into Ukraine. I believe the Ukrainians will fight back. This will be a very tough war for the Russians. This will result in coffins going back to Russia. It will degrade and damage Putin's regime. I do believe, from what we're seeing at the moment, he is hell-bent on doing it.
from that, then, you're saying sanctions aren't going to work. So should we consider other measures?
Well, we have to do all we can on sanctions, and over the medium and long term, it will degrade the Russian economy. We also have to strengthen NATO's eastern flank and continue to supply support to Ukraine. We are doing all we can, and we're working with our international allies to make sure that we have a strong and coordinated response.
OK, Secretary of State, you've got to go. Thanks for talking to us. Thanks for joining us on GB News this morning. We appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Tom, what do you make of all of that?
Well, it's pretty strong language in terms of moving forward on the sanctions regime, nothing being off the table. This could be a complete sealing off of the Russian economy from the United Kingdom and the West in general. That's pretty significant when it comes to the idea that Putin is absolutely hell-bent, as we heard there from the Foreign Secretary, on pursuing his westward expansion, on not just looking at Ukraine, but looking at those Baltic states as well. That is something that we should all be incredibly concerned about, because, of course, those Baltic states are in NATO, and were any Russian troops to incur upon those countries, we would de facto be at war with Russia, which is an incredibly serious prospect.
And it's worth bearing in mind in all of this, when it comes to the Baltics, I mean, although that was supposedly settled a couple of decades ago, actually there's still a lot of unrest in those countries, and this could trigger more, couldn't it?
It certainly could, which is why I think that the Foreign Secretary was emphasising all of these avenues are being explored, not just sanctions in terms of individuals in Russia, but that cultural power. The Foreign Secretary saying there for the first time today that she does not think that football match should go ahead in St. Petersburg, but equally as well, troops that we're sending to the Baltic region, the air support that we're sending, and the naval power that we're sending. This is a multi-pronged approach outlined there by the Foreign Secretary.
And do you detect a note of contradiction in what she's saying, in that, you know, they're going to go harder, they're going to go stronger, and yet she thinks it's going to happen? It's an inevitability.
Yes, it seems like what the current state of affairs is that the Foreign Office believe that Putin is absolutely hell-bent and nothing may stop him. But situations change. What we're seeing now is a snapshot, not a forecast. And therefore, were these sanctions to be heavily put upon Russia, potentially, that could change the dictator's mind. It does seem, though, that you're right. There is a bit of a contradiction there. If there's no wiggle room, if what we have been doing so far doesn't seem to have worked, potentially harder sanctions need to be applied faster to see if they will budge President Putin's mind.
Diplomatically, it is very difficult, isn't it? And someone emailed in earlier and made a very good point. So you've got to give Putin an escape route. He's got to go back to Moscow at some point with his claiming he's got something out of all of this. Other, what's the intention for him to stop otherwise? That's very difficult, isn't it? But to try and push forward with this, but say yes, you can get out of this without this escalating.
I think the West would be so reluctant to go down that path. When we talk about responding to strength with concession, we're into the realm of appeasement. We're into the realm of what happened in the 1930s, even. If Putin is seen to get a political victory off the back of piling up over 100,000 troops on the borders of Europe, of rolling tanks into a foreign sovereign country, if he's seen to be rewarded for that, what message does that send to China and Taiwan? What message does that send to all the nefarious and dictatorial regimes around the world?
Yeah, look, we've put troops into countries without so much as an invasion having taken place. So there will be people, perhaps within the military or, people just commentating at home, thinking actually that we should have a military response to this. I suppose the shadow of Afghanistan looming very large in the political mind, anyway, of why we're not doing that.
And also the prospect of a Western nuclear power being in a hot war with Russia is an incredibly novel prospect. As far as I'm aware, no nuclear power has ever been in a hot war directly with another nuclear power. So the prospect of NATO countries being physically at war with Russia would be an entirely novel scenario in the history of this world.
Well, that's your potential of World War III. isn't it? I mean, which is no messing about, and it would inevitably mean body bags coming back to the UK, of which there can be no appetite at the moment for that.
This is why the United Kingdom seems to be applying deterrence as its primary strategy, putting troops in, as we have done, to train Ukrainian troops, but not to fight Russian troops, putting British troops up in the Baltic countries and air and naval support around Ukraine as well, but not putting numbers of UK troops that may have the prospect of war with Russia. That is an entirely separate situation, and one that would be deeply, deeply damaging.
OK, Tom, thank you very much.
Let's just bring you up to date with some of the other stories this morning. And almost half of young people say the pandemic has left them feeling burnt out and self-loathing. The Prince's Trust surveyed 16 to 25-year-olds, discovering what they called an alarming downward spiral of anxiety, stress and lack of confidence for the future.
Around 1 million operations a year are cancelled or delayed due to a shortage of 1,400 NHS anaesthetists. The Royal College of Anaesthetists says that could rise to 8 million operations by 2040, with the staff shortfall set to reach 11,000 if action is not taken.
More than 8 in 10 Scots are worried about the soaring costs of energy on household budgets. It's a YouGov poll shows consumers in Scotland are concerned about the huge rises that are set for April.
Coming up, we're going to have a wild weather explainer asking all the questions perhaps you might be too embarrassed to ask, like why is the sky blue? What causes storms? That's going to be the heart of it all. That's in a moment. See you in a sec.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
What's going on with the weather? Storms galore at the minute. We've got Gladys on the way. That's the next one due. Then in Marnie, and all chaos. It's just horrific, isn't it? Flooding and all the rest of it. So what is going on? Why is it all happening? Well, let's see if we can find out from science broadcaster Mark Thompson. Good to see you this morning, Mark. Look, put this in really simple. Yeah, we're all right, but we're fed up with the weather. So put it into some sort of context for us. Why is this happening?
Well, the world's weather is driven by the sun, ultimately. So the warming, the energy from the sun warms the gas which surrounds the planet and warms up the atmosphere. And that causes the air to rise and to sink as it warms and cools. Now, that changes because the Earth is rotating as well. And we end up with this sort of the powerhouse which drives the circulation of all those rising and sinking patterns of air, which is called the jet stream. And it's something probably most people have heard of. And it's a series of, or like a channel of, or corridor of fast-moving winds that's usually further north than us, up nearer the Arctic regions. But at the moment, we've had this kink, if you like, in the jet stream, which has brought it lower down over Europe, which has produced this sort of blocking event. And with a blocking event, you can end up with more intense weather, such as the storms that we've been seeing.
OK, I have children, and any parent will tell you kids ask you questions and they make you feel really stupid, and you have to try and understand, what's going on meteorologically. Why would a jet stream, why would wind that's being blown in our direction create flooding?
Yeah, and it's got, when you think about it, it's one of those things, isn't it? Unless you think about what's happening, it is quite hard to get your head around. Now, when we get the wind, of course, stuff blows around. We can see leaves blowing around the roads, trees blowing down, all that sort of thing. Now, the same thing happens with water. And as you get wind blowing across the ocean, then it drags the surface water along with it. And you end up with a build-up of water, which then leads to rising levels of water in the seas and in the rivers, which leads to flooding. And we do get, occasionally we get around low pressure regions where in low pressure you get like a swelling, almost like a hump of water inside a sort of a tornado or a hurricane. But in the case of the winds we've just had, then the winds have literally just blown surface water in off the oceans, which has led to all the horrific flooding we've seen around the country.
We've just got about 30 seconds before our forecast, so flooding, storms. Well, now we've had an earthquake.
Wait, did you say we've never had an earthquake, or now we've had an earthquake?
We've just had an earthquake, haven't we?
Have we? When did that happen?
In Birmingham.
Did it? When did that happen then? Last night?
Yeah, last night I think, or the night before. About 3.2 on the scale. Anyway, we're out of time, Mark. We're out of time.
Okay. We'll save that for next time we talk to you.
I'm glad we've told you something this morning.
I've learned something myself today.
That was unexpected. Really good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Mark Thomas. Good to see you. Look, that's it from us. Stick around. Tom Harwood will be up next with the briefing. See you tomorrow.
Good morning. The winds will again be picking up today and potentially causing some problems. We have more Met Office warnings in place. Wet weather for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mostly dry day for England and Wales. Now, this time yesterday we had a weather front slipping south, and we've got almost a repeat performance today. But this one's really introducing some much colder air, and behind this cold front, we're going to see things turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Initially, though, that'll just be a band of rain with some hill snow mixed in. The wind's picking up. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place through today across southeast Scotland and northeast England, with those gusts likely to reach 40, 50 or 60 miles an hour. After recent storms, that could cause some issues. Quite a wet day then for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland. For England and Wales, maybe 1 or 2 showers, but generally it's dry and still pretty mild here, 10, 11 degrees Celsius. But the colder air is pushing in behind this rain band, and we have a Met Office warning in place for the combination of snow and wind across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The snow showers really getting going overnight. We could easily see covering several centimetres, even at low levels, and quite a bit more than that over the hills. It'll be rain that pushes south across England and Wales, but the showers following on across northern England, likely to have a wintry mix in here too. And the warning is still in place for much of Thursday as the winds start to whip up once more, blowing the snow around. So a combination of snow and wind blizzards makes for some pretty grim travelling conditions during tomorrow across western Scotland, even central and eastern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it'll start wet across the southeast. It then turns brighter with sunny spells, just a sprinkling of showers, snow on the hills across northern England for sure. But it will be blustery once more, and that's going to make it feel cold through tomorrow. Temperatures only 6 or 7 for many of us. Add on that wind, it will feel much colder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest